9. I watched as several expressions passed over her face at once. Embarrassment, annoyance, and then curiosity? I could vaguely make out a man's voice on the other end and felt the caveman begin to awaken. Who the hell was calling her? Suddenly, her eyes narrowed, and a tiny voice inside told me I should be nervous. Well, thank you so much for letting me know. Yes, I will. Okay. Yes, I'll call you when I decide. Thanks for calling, Joel. Joel? Fucking Signoli. She ended the call and slowly put the phone back into her purse. Looking down, she shook her head, a small laugh escaping before a wicked smile graced her mouth. Is there anything you'd like to tell me, Mr. Ryan? She asked sweetly, and for some reason it made me even more anxious. I racked my brain but couldn't think of anything. What was she talking about? That was the strangest conversation. It seems that when Joel checked his email this morning, he had a delivery confirmation for my flowers. You'll never guess what it said. She moved one step toward me, and instinctively I moved one step back. I didn't like where this was going. It turns out that someone signed for them. Oh, shit. The name on the slip said Bennett Ryan. Fuck. Why the hell did I sign my own name? I tried to think of a response, but my mind was suddenly blank. Obviously, my silence told her everything she needed to know. You son of a bitch! You signed for them and then lied to me? She landed a hard shove on my chest, and I had a sudden instinct to protect my balls. Why did you do that? My back was now against the wall, and I was frantically searching for an alternative exit. What? I babbled. My heart felt like it was going to claw its way out of my chest. Seriously, what the hell? I needed an answer, and I needed it fast. Running my hand through my hair for the 100th time in the last 5 minutes, I decided it was probably better to just come clean. I don't know, okay? I shouted back. Fuck. She took out her phone and appeared to be texting someone. What are you doing? I asked. Not that it's any of your business, but I'm telling Julia to just go on without me. I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth. She glared at me, and I could feel the anger coming off of her in waves. I briefly considered telling Emily what was going on, but she'd seen me follow Chloe. I was pretty sure she'd figured it out by now. Well? I met her eyes and let out a deep sigh. There was absolutely no way I could explain myself and not sound like I'd lost my mind. Okay, yes. I signed for them. She stared at me, her chest heaving and her fists balled so tightly that her knuckles were white. And I threw them away. As I stood facing her, I realized that I deserved every bit of her anger. I was being unfair. I was offering her nothing, but still standing in the way of someone who could possibly make her happy. You are fucking unbelievable, she growled through clenched teeth. I knew she was doing everything she could to keep from lunging across the room and pummeling me. Explain to me why you would do that. Here was the part I didn't know how to answer. Because I scratched the back of my head. I hated that I'd let myself get into this situation. Because I don't want you to go out with Joel. Of all the asinine, chauvinistic... Who in the hell do you think you are? Just because we've had sex does not mean you get to make decisions in my life. We aren't a couple. We aren't dating. Hell, we don't even like each other, she yelled. You think I don't know that? It doesn't make any sense, okay? But when I saw those flowers, come on, they were fucking roses. She looked as if she were ready to have me committed somewhere. Are you on some sort of medication? What does the fact that they were roses have to do with anything? You hate roses. When I said this, her face fell, eyes soft and dark. I rambled on. I just saw them and reacted. I didn't stop and think about it. Just the thought of him touching you. My fists clenched at my sides and my voice trailed off as I tried to regain my composure. I was getting angrier by the second. At myself for being weak and letting my emotions get out of hand again, and at her for having this fucking inexplicable hold on me. Okay, look, she said, taking a calming breath. I'm not saying I agree with what you did, but I understand. To a point. My eyes flew to her in shock. I would be lying if I said I haven't been feeling similarly possessive, she said reluctantly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did she actually just admit to me that she felt this way too? But that doesn't change the fact that you lied to me. You lied right to my face. I might think you're an arrogant asshole most of the time, but you've always been someone I trusted to be honest with me. I flinched. She was right. I'm sorry. My apology hung in the air, and I wasn't sure which of us was more surprised by it. Prove it. She looked at me so calmly, not an ounce of emotion visible in her features. What did she mean? Then it hit me. Prove it. We couldn't speak through words because words only led to trouble. But this is what we were. And if she would give me this one chance to make up for what I'd done, I'd take it. I hated her so much in that moment. I hated that she was right and I was wrong, and I hated that she was forcing me to make a choice. I hated how much I wanted her most of all. I closed the distance between us, wrapping my hand around the back of her neck. I pulled her to me, meeting her gaze as I drew her mouth to mine. There was an unspoken challenge there. Neither of us would back down or admit that this, whatever this was beyond our control. Or maybe both of us just had. The moment our lips touched, I was overtaken by a familiar buzz coursing through my body. My hands fisted deeply into her hair, forcing her head back to take everything I pressed into her. This might be for her, but I was damn sure going to control it. Pressing my body to hers, I groaned at the way each of her curves fit against me. I wanted this need to go away, to be satisfied and move on. But each time I felt her, it was better than I remembered. Falling to my knees, I grasped her hips and pulled her closer, my lips moving across the waist of her pants. Lifting her shirt up, I kissed each inch of visible skin, enjoying the tensing of her muscles as I explored. I looked up at her, hooked my fingers into the waistband. Her eyes were closed and she was biting her lower lip. I felt my cock harden in anticipation of what I was about to do. I pulled her pants down her thighs, goosebumps breaking out over her skin as I trailed my fingers down her legs. Her hands went to my hair and pulled roughly, and I groaned as I looked back up at her. I traced the edge of the delicate satin of her lingerie, stopping at the thin straps on her hips. These are almost too pretty to ruin, I said, wrapping one strap around each hand. Almost. With a quick tug, they broke easily, allowing me to pull the pink material away and stuff it into my pocket. A sense of urgency took over me then, and I quickly freed one of her legs, placing it over my shoulder and kissing along the soft skin of her inner thigh. Oh, shit, she said on an exhale, running her hands into my hair. Oh, shit. Please. As I first nuzzled and then slowly licked along her clit, she gripped my hair tightly, moving her hips against my mouth. Unintelligible words fell from her lips in a hoarse whisper, and seeing her come undone so completely made me realize she was as helpless against this as I was. She was pissed at me, so pissed that part of her probably wanted to hook her leg around my neck and strangle me. But at least she was letting me give her something that was, in many ways, so much more intimate than simple fucking. I was on my knees, but she was vulnerable and bare. She was also warm and wet and tasted just as fucking sweet as she looked. "I could fucking consume you," I whispered, pulling back enough to glance up at her expression. Kissing her hip, I murmured, "This would be so much better if I could spread you out somewhere. A table in a conference room, perhaps." She tugged on my hair, pulling me back to her with a smile. "This is working just fine for me. Don't you dare stop." I almost admitted aloud that I couldn't, and I was starting to abhor the thought of even trying, but soon was lost in her skin again. I wanted to memorize every curse and plea that escaped her mouth and know that I was the reason for it. I moaned against her, causing her to cry out as she twisted her body closer. Sliding 2 fingers inside her, I pulled on her hip with the other hand, to urge her to find her rhythm with me. She began rolling her hips, slowly at first, pressing into me, and then faster. I could feel her tense, her legs, her abdomen, her hands in my hair. "So close," she panted, her movements faltering, growing jagged and a little wild. And fuck if I didn't feel a little wild myself. I wanted to bite and suck, bury my fingers inside and completely unravel her. I worried I was growing too rough, but her breaths turned into little pants and tightened into pleas. When I twisted my wrist and pushed in deeper, she cried out, legs shaking as her climax overtook her. Rubbing her hip, I slowly lowered her leg and watched her feet just in case she decided to kick me after all. I ran a finger across my lip and watched her eyes return to focus. She pushed me away and quickly righted her clothing, looking down at where I kneeled in front of her. Reality crept back as the various sounds of people dining on the other side of the door combined with the sound of our heavy breathing. "You're not forgiven," she said, and reached down for her purse, unlocking the door and leaving the room without another word. I stood up slowly and watched the door close behind her, trying to sort out what had just happened. I should have been furious, but I felt the corner of my mouth lift in a smile, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Damn her, she did it again. She was beating me at my own game. My night had been hell. I'd hardly slept or eaten, and I'd suffered a near-constant hard-on since leaving the restaurant yesterday. I knew I was in for it as I headed to work. She was going to do everything she could to torture and punish me for lying to her. The sick thing was, I was kind of looking forward to it. I was surprised to find her desk empty upon my arrival. Strange, I thought. She was rarely late. I continued into my office and began getting things in order for the day. 15 minutes later, I was distracted from a phone call when I heard the outer door slam. Well, she certainly didn't disappoint. I could hear drawers and files slamming and knew this would make for an interesting day. At 10:15, I was interrupted by my intercom. "Mr. Ryan?" Her cool voice filled the room, and despite her obvious annoyance, I found myself smirking as I pressed the button to respond. "Yes, Miss Mills?" I answered back, hearing my own grin reflected in my tone. "We need to be in the conference room in 15 minutes. You'll need to leave at noon to make the lunch meeting with the president of Kelly Industries at 12:30. Stuart will be waiting for you in the garage." "Are you not accompanying me?" Part of me wondered if she was avoiding being alone with me. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. "No, sir. Management only." I heard papers rustling as she continued to speak. "Besides, I have arrangements to make for San Diego today." "I'll be out in a moment." I let my finger slide off the button, standing to adjust my tie and jacket. When I stepped out of my office, my eyes landed on her immediately. Any doubts I might have had about her making me suffer were confirmed. She was leaning over her desk in a blue silk dress that showcased her long, lean legs perfectly. Her hair was piled on her head, and when she turned in my direction, I saw she was wearing her glasses. How was I going to manage to speak coherently with her sitting next to me? "Are you ready, Mr. Ryan?" Without waiting for an answer, she gathered her things and began walking down the hall. There seemed to be more sway to her hips today. the sassy bitch was taunting me. Standing in the crowded elevator, our bodies were unintentionally pressed together, and I had to stifle a groan. It could have been my imagination, but I thought I saw a hint of a smirk as she accidentally brushed against my semi-erect cock. Twice. For the next 2 hours, I was in my own personal hell. Every time I looked at her, she was doing something to bring me to my knees. Sly glances, licking her bottom lip, crossing and uncrossing her legs, or absent-mindedly twirling a tendril of her hair around her finger. At one point, she dropped her pen and casually placed her hand on my thigh as she bent down to retrieve it from under the table. At the lunch meeting that followed, I was both grateful for the reprieve from her torment and desperate to get back to it. I nodded and spoke at appropriate times, but I was never really there. Of course, my father had noticed every second of my surly, quiet mood. On the drive back to the office, he started in on me. "For 3 days, you and Chloe will be together in San Diego without the buffer of office doors, and there won't be anyone there to run interference. I expect you to treat her with the utmost respect, and before you get defensive," he added, holding his hands up as he sensed my quick rebuttal, "I've already spoken to Chloe about this." My eyes widened and flashed to his face. He had talked to Miss Mills about my professional conduct? "Yes, I'm aware that it's not just you," he said, leading us into an empty elevator. "She's assured me that she gives every bit as good as she gets. Why do you think I suggested you as her program mentor in the first place? There wasn't a doubt in my mind that she could hold her own with you." Henry stood silent next to him, a smug smile stretched across his face. Asshole. I frowned slightly as the realization hit me. She had spoken in my defense. She could have easily made it sound like I was a tyrant, but instead she accepted some of the blame. "Dad, I'll admit that my relationship with her is unconventional," I began, praying that no one understood how true that statement really was. "But I assure you, it in no way interferes with our ability to conduct business. You have nothing to worry about." "Good," Dad said when we arrived at my office suite. We walked in to find Miss Mills on the phone, speaking almost inaudibly. "Well, I'm going to let you go, Dad. I have some things to take care of, and I'll let you know as soon as I can. You need to get some sleep, okay?" she said softly. After a brief pause, she laughed, but then didn't say anything else for a moment. Neither I nor the 2 men beside me dared say anything. "I love you too, Daddy." My stomach tightened at the words, and the way her voice shook when she said them. When she turned around in her chair, she startled to find us standing there. Quickly, she began gathering the paperwork on her desk. "How did the meeting go?" "It went smoothly, as always," my father said. "You and Sarah really do a superb job taking care of things. I don't know what my sons would do without the 2 of you." Her eyebrow lifted slightly, and I could see her struggling to not gloat in my direction. But then her face transformed into a puzzled expression, and I realized I'd been full-on grinning at her, hoping to see some of her trademark sass. I put on the best scowl I could manage as I walked into my office. It only hit me when I closed my door that I hadn't seen her smile once since we'd come back and heard her on the phone. 10. My head wasn't in the game. I had a few things to show Mr. Ryan before he left for the day, had to get some documents to legal for signatures, but I felt like I was walking through wet sand, the phone conversation with my dad looping endlessly through my thoughts. As I walked into Mr. Ryan's office, I stared down at the papers in my arms, realizing how many things I'd need to organize today. Plane tickets, someone to pick up my mail, maybe even a temp for while I was gone. How long would I be gone? I registered Mr. Ryan was saying something, loudly, in my direction. What was he saying? He came into focus in front of me and I heard the end of his rant. "Barely paying attention. Jesus, Miss Mills, do I need to write this down for you?" Can we skip this game today? I asked, tired. The... what now? This asshole boss routine. His eyes widened, brows drawing together. Excuse me? I realize you get your rocks off on being an epic dick to me, and I'll admit that sometimes it's actually kind of sexy, but I'm having a horrible, awful day and would really appreciate it if you would just not speak. To me. I was close to tears, my chest constricting painfully. Please. He looked like he'd been blindsided, blinking rapidly as he stared. Finally, he spluttered, "What just happened?" I swallowed, regretting my tantrum. Things were always better with him when I kept my wits. I overreacted to being yelled at. I apologized. He got up and began walking toward me, but at the last minute he stopped and sat down on the corner of his desk, fiddling awkwardly with a crystal paperweight. No, I mean, why is your day so horrible? What's going on? His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it outside of sex, except this time he wasn't quiet to keep a secret. He was quiet because he seemed genuinely concerned. I didn't want to talk to him about this because part of me expected him to mock me, but an even larger part was beginning to suspect that he wouldn't. My dad has to have some tests. He's having trouble eating. Mr. Ryan's face fell. Eating? Is it an ulcer? I explained what I knew, that it had started suddenly and an early scan showed a small mass on his esophagus. Can you go home? I stared at him. I don't know. Can I? He winced, blinked away. Am I really that big of a jerk? Sometimes. I immediately regretted it, because, no, he'd never done anything to make me think he'd keep me from my sick father. He nodded, swallowing thickly as he stared out the window. You can take whatever time you need, of course. Thank you. I stared at the floor, waiting for him to continue with the list of the day's tasks, but silence engulfed the room instead. I could see in my peripheral vision that he'd turned back and was watching me. Are you okay? He'd said it so quietly I wasn't even sure I heard him right. I considered lying, wrapping up this most awkward of conversations. Instead, I said, Not really. His hand reached up, dug into his hair. Close my office door, he said. I nodded, oddly disappointed to be so quietly dismissed. I'll bring the notes from legal close the door, but stay. Oh. I turned, walking across the plush carpet in complete silence. His office door closed with a heavy click. Lock it. I turned the lock and felt him move closer until his breath fanned warm across the back of my neck. Let me touch you. Let me do something. He understood. He knew what he could give me. Distraction, relief, pleasure in the face of surging panic. I didn't reply because I knew I didn't need to. I'd closed and locked the door, after all. But then I felt his lips, soft and pressing against my shoulder, up my neck. You smell amazing, he said, untying my dress where it fastened behind my neck. I always smell like you for hours afterward. He didn't add whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, and I found that I didn't care. I liked that he smelled me even when I'd gone. With his hands sliding to my hips, he turned me to face him and bent to kiss me in a single smooth movement. This was different. His mouth was soft, almost asking. There was nothing tentative about the kiss. There was never anything tentative about him. But this kiss almost felt more adoring and less like a battle being lost. He pushed my dress from my shoulders and it pooled at my feet as he stepped back, giving just enough room to let the cool air of his office wash his heat from my skin. "You're beautiful." Before I could process the soft delivery of these new words, he threw me a smirk and leaned to kiss me as he grabbed my panties, twisted, and ripped them. This we knew. I reached for his pants, but he stepped away, shaking his head. He moved his hand between my legs, found smooth, wet skin. His breath grew faster on my cheek, and his fingers were somehow careful and hard, his words coming out deep, filthy, telling me I was beautiful, I was so dirty, telling me I was a tease and how good I made him feel. He told me how much he craved the way I sound when I come. And even when I did, gasping and clutching his shoulders through his suit, all I could think was that I wanted to touch him too, that I wanted to hear him get lost in me the same way, and it terrified me. He withdrew his fingers, sweeping across my sensitive clit when he did and eliciting an involuntary shudder. "Sorry, sorry," he whispered in response, kissing my jaw, my chin, my... "Don't," I said, turning my mouth away from his. The sudden intimacy he offered, on top of everything else today, was too bewildering, too much. His forehead rested against mine for a few beats before he nodded, once. It wrecked me, suddenly realizing that I'd always assumed he held the power and I held none. But in this moment, I knew that I could have as much power over him as I wanted. I just had to be brave enough to take it. "I'll be leaving town this weekend. I don't know how long I'll be gone." "Well, then get back to work while you're here, Miss Mills." 11. When Thursday morning dawned, I knew we needed to have some sort of discussion. I would be away from the office all day Friday, so today was our last day together before she left town. She'd been meeting with her advisor all morning, and I felt myself getting more and more anxious about everything. I was pretty sure the interaction in my office the day before revealed to us both that she was slowly taking more and more of me. I wanted to be with her almost all of the time, and not just naked and wild. I just wanted to be near her, and my own need for self-preservation had been plaguing me all week. What had she said? "I don't want to want this. This isn't good for me." Only when Mina discovered us had I truly understood what Chloe meant. I'd hated my desire for her because it was the first time in my life I was unable to push something out of my head and focus on work. But no one, not even my family, would really blame me for being attracted to Chloe. In contrast, she would forever be tainted with the reputation of being the woman who slept her way to the top. For someone as brilliant and driven as she was, that association would be a constant and painful thorn in her side. She was right to put distance between us. This pull we felt when we were together was entirely unhealthy. Nothing good could come from it, and I decided, once again, to use our time apart to regain my focus. When I entered my office after lunch, I was surprised to find her seated at her desk, busily working on the computer. "I didn't know you would be in this afternoon," I said, trying to keep any emotion from my voice. "Yes, I had some last-minute arrangements to handle for San Diego, and I still needed to discuss my absence with you," she said, never looking up from her computer monitor. "Would you like to step into my office, then?" "No," she said quickly. "I think we can handle this out here." Peeking up at me with a sly look, she motioned to the chair opposite her. "Would you like to have a seat, Mr. Ryan?" Ah, home court advantage. I sat down across from her. "I know you'll be out tomorrow, so there's no reason for me to be here. I realize you don't like having an assistant, but I've arranged for you to have a temp while I'm gone for 2 weeks. And I've already given Sarah a detailed list of your schedule and the things you'll need. I doubt there will be any problems, but just in case, she's promised to keep an eye on you." She raised a brow in challenge, and I rolled my eyes in return. She continued. You have my numbers, including the number of my father's home in Bismarck, if you need anything. She began going through a list in front of her, and I noticed how cool and efficient she was. It's not that I wasn't already aware of these things, but somehow it seemed a bit more apparent to me right now. Our eyes met, and she continued. I'll get into California a few hours before you, so I'll just plan on picking you up at the airport. We continued to stare at each other for a few moments, and I was almost positive that our thoughts were the same. San Diego would be a colossal test. The atmosphere in the room began to shift slowly, the silence saying more than words ever could. I clenched my jaw tightly as I noticed that her breathing had picked up. It took every bit of willpower I had to not walk around the desk and kiss her. Have a nice trip, Miss Mills, I said, pleased that my voice betrayed none of my inner turmoil. I stood and lingered for a moment, adding, So, I'll meet you in San Diego then? Yes. I nodded and walked into my office, shutting the door behind me. I didn't see her for the rest of the day, and our terse goodbye for once felt completely wrong. All weekend I thought about what it would be like to have her gone for 2 weeks. On the one hand, it would be nice to enjoy a full day at work without the distraction. On the other, I wondered if it would feel odd not having her there. She'd been a near constant in my life for almost a year, and regardless of our differences, it had been comforting to have her around. Sarah entered my office on Monday at 9 o'clock sharp, smiling brightly as she approached me. She was followed by an attractive 20-something brunette who was introduced as Kelsey, my new temporary assistant. She looked up at me with a somewhat timid smile, and I saw Sarah place a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I decided that I would use this as an opportunity. I would prove to everyone that my reputation was simply a result of working with someone as headstrong as Miss Mills. It's very nice to meet you, Kelsey, I said, smiling widely and offering her my hand to shake. She looked at me strangely with a sort of glazed expression. It's nice to meet you too, sir, she said as she glanced back at Sarah. Sarah looked down at my hand quizzically and back up to me before speaking to Kelsey. Okay, well, we've already gone over everything that Chloe left. Here's your desk. She led the temp over to Miss Mills' chair. A strange feeling crept over me at the image of someone else sitting there. I felt my smile falter, and I turned to Sarah. If she needs anything, she'll let you know. I'll be in my office. Kelsey quit before lunch. Apparently, I came off a bit gruff when she managed to start a small fire in the break room microwave. The last I saw of her, she was in tears and sprinting out my door, wailing something about a hostile work environment. The second temp, a young man named Isaac, came in around 2 o'clock. Isaac seemed highly intelligent, and I looked forward to working with someone other than an emotional female. I found myself smiling at the sudden turn of events. Unfortunately, I spoke too soon. Every time I passed Isaac at his computer, he was online, looking at captioned pictures of cats or watching a music video. He would quickly minimize the window, but, unfortunately for Isaac, I wasn't a complete idiot. I diplomatically asked him to not bother returning the next day. The third was no better. Her name was Jill. She talked too much, her clothing was too tight, and the way she gnawed on the cap of her pen made her look like an animal trying to free itself from a trap. It was nothing like the way Miss Mills would pensively hold the end of her pen between her teeth when she was deep in thought. That was subtle and sexy. This was nothing short of obscene. Unacceptable. She was gone by Tuesday afternoon. The week continued on in much the same way. I went through 5 different assistants. I heard the booming laugh of my brother in the hall outside my office on more than one occasion. Jackass. He didn't even work on this floor. I began to feel that people were enjoying my misery a bit too much, and maybe even saw it as a case of reaping what I sowed. Although I had absolutely no doubt that Miss Mills had already been informed of my temp nightmares by Sarah, I received several texts from her throughout the first week, checking on how things were going. I began looking forward to them, even checking my phone periodically to see if I might have missed an alert. I hated to admit it, but at this point I would have traded my car just to have her and her harpy disposition back. Besides missing her body, which I did desperately, I also missed the fire between us. She knew I was a bastard, and she put up with it. I had no idea why, but she did. I felt my respect for her professionalism grow during that first week apart. When the second week went by without a single text from her, I found myself wondering what she was doing and with whom she was doing it. I wondered briefly if she'd had any more phone calls with Joel. I was pretty sure they hadn't seen each other again, and she and I had managed to reach a precarious ceasefire regarding the flower incident. Still, I wondered if he'd ever called to follow up and whether he would try to begin something when she was home. Home. Was she at home now, with her father? Or did she think of Chicago as home? For the first time, it occurred to me that if her father was very sick, she might decide to move back to North Dakota to be with him. Fuck. I started packing for my flight on Sunday night, and heard my phone chirp from the bed next to my suitcase. I felt a small thrill reading her name on the screen. Pick you up tomorrow, 11:30. Terminal B near arrival screens. Text when you land. I paused for a moment as it sank in that we would be together tomorrow. I will, thanks. You're welcome. Everything go okay? I was a bit taken aback that she had asked about the rest of my week. We were in such uncharted territory here. While working, we texted and emailed frequently, but it was usually restricted to simple yes or no answers, never anything personal. Was it possible she'd had a similarly frustrating week? Great. You? How is your dad? I laughed as I pushed send. This situation kept getting stranger. Less than a minute later, I received another one. He's doing fine. I've missed him, but am excited to come home. Home. I noted her word choice and swallowed. My chest was suddenly too tight. See you tomorrow. Setting the alarm on my phone, I placed it on the nightstand and sat next to my luggage on the bed. I would see her in less than 12 hours. And I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about that. 12. Just as I'd hoped, the flight to San Diego had given me time to think. I felt loved and rested after my visit with my dad. After his appointment with the gastroenterologist put us both at ease that the tumor was benign, we'd spent time together talking and reminiscing about Mom, even planning a trip for him to come out to Chicago. By the time he kissed me goodbye, I felt as prepared as possible considering the situation. I was nervous as hell to face Mr. Ryan again, but I'd given myself my best pep talk. I'd done some online shopping and had a suitcase full of new power panties. I'd thought long and hard about my options, and I was pretty sure I had a plan. The first step was to admit that this problem was more than just the temptation of proximity. Being 1,000 miles apart had done nothing to calm my need. I'd dreamed of him nearly every night, waking each morning frustrated and lonely. I spent far too much time thinking about what he was doing, wondering if he was as confused as me, and trying to glean every bit of information I could from Sarah about how things were going back home. Sarah and I had an interesting conversation when she'd called and informed me of the status of my replacement. I'd laughed hysterically hearing about the revolving door of temps. Of course Bennett was having a hard time keeping anyone around. He was an asshole. I was used to his mood swings and gruff attitude. Professionally, our relationship ran like clockwork. It was the personal side that was a nightmare. Almost everyone knew it. They just didn't know the extent of the situation. I thought back often to our last day together. Something in our relationship was shifting, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. No matter how many times we said it would never happen again, it would. I was terrified that this man, who was all wrong for me, had more control over my body than I did, no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise. I didn't want to be the woman who sacrificed her ambitions for a man. Standing in the arrival area, I gave myself one last pep talk. I could do this. Oh, God, I hoped I could do this. The butterflies in my stomach were working overtime, and I briefly worried I might throw up. His plane had been delayed in Chicago, and it was after 6:30 before he finally touched down in San Diego. While the time on the plane out had been good for thinking, the 7 extra hours waiting afterward had only reignited my nerves. I stood on my tiptoes trying to get a better view through the crowd, but didn't see him. Looking down at my phone, I reread his text again. Just landed. See you in a few. There was nothing sentimental about the text, but it made my stomach flip anyway. Our messages last night had been the same. It wasn't that we said anything special. I'd simply asked how the rest of his week had gone. That wouldn't be considered unusual in any other relationship, but it was totally new for us. Maybe there was a chance we could actually get past the constant animosity and actually be... what? Friends? With my stomach in knots, I paced back and forth, willing my mind to switch gears and my heart rate to calm. Without thinking, I stopped mid-step and turned toward the oncoming crowd, searching through the sea of unknown faces. My breath caught in my throat when a head of familiar hair appeared above the others. Get a hold of yourself, Chloe. Jesus. I tried once more to get my body under control and looked up again. Fuck. I am so screwed. There he was, looking better than I'd ever seen him. How the hell does someone get better looking in 9 days? And coming off of an airplane, no less. He stood nearly a head taller than anyone around him, the kind of tall that stands out in a crowd, and I gave thanks to the universe for that. His dark hair was a nightmare as usual. No doubt he'd had his hands in it 100 times during the last hour. He wore dark slacks, a charcoal blazer, and a white dress shirt that was unbuttoned at the neck. He looked tired and had a bit of stubble on his face, but that wasn't what had my heart beating a mile a minute. He'd been looking down at the ground, but the moment our eyes met, his face split into the most genuinely happy smile I'd ever seen. Before I could stop it, I felt my own smile explode, wide and giddy. He stopped in front of me, a slightly tenser look taking over his features, while both of us waited for the other to say something. Hi, I said awkwardly, trying to ease some of the tension between us. Every part of me wanted to pull him into the ladies' room, but somehow I doubted that was the proper way to greet your boss. Not that that had ever mattered before. Hi, he answered, his brow furrowed slightly. Fuck, snap out of it, Chloe. We both turned, heading toward the baggage claim, and I felt goosebumps spread across my skin just being near him. How was your flight? I asked, knowing how much he hated flying commercial airlines, even if it was first class. This was so ridiculous. I wished he would just say something asinine so I could go back to yelling at him. He thought about it for a moment before answering. It was pleasant enough, once we actually got off the ground. I don't like how crowded the planes are. We stopped and waited, surrounded by bustling people, but the only thing I noticed was the tension building between us, and every inch of space between our bodies. And your father's health? He asked a moment later. I nodded. Benign. Thanks for asking. Of course. Minutes passed in uncomfortable silence, and I was more than a bit relieved when I saw his luggage slide down the conveyor belt. We both reached for it at the same time, and our hands touched briefly on the handle. Pulling back, I glanced up to find he was watching me. My stomach dropped at the familiar look of hunger in his eyes. We both muttered apologies, and I looked away, but not before noticing the slight smirk on his face. Fortunately, it was time to pick up the rental car, and we headed to the parking garage. He looked pleased as we approached the luxury rental, a Benz SLS AMG. He loved to drive fast, and I always made a point of ordering something fun for him when he needed a car. "Very nice, Miss Mills," he said, his hand sliding along the hood. "Remind me to think about giving you a raise." I felt the familiar desire to punch him spread through my body, and it calmed me. Everything was so much clearer when he was being an outright douche. Pressing the button to release the trunk, I gave him a reproachful look and stepped aside for him to put his things away. He took off his jacket and handed it to me. I shoved it into the trunk. "Careful," he admonished. "I'm not a bellhop. Put your own damn coat away." He laughed and bent to lift his suitcase. "Christ, I just wanted you to hold it for a moment." "Oh." My cheeks flushed at my overreaction. I reached in and grabbed the coat, smoothing it over my arm. "Sorry." "Why do you always assume I'm being a jerk?" "Because you usually are?" With another laugh, he hoisted the suitcase into the trunk. "You must have missed me a lot." I started to answer, but got distracted instead, watching the muscles of his back tighten his shirt as he placed his luggage in the trunk next to mine. Up close, I saw that the dress shirt had a subtle gray print and was tailored to fit his broad shoulders and narrow waist without any extra fabric bunching anywhere. His pants were dark gray and crisply pressed. I was pretty sure he'd never done his own laundry. And damn, who would blame him when tailored, dry-cleaned clothes made him so completely fuckable? Stop. Stop! He closed the trunk with a slam, breaking me out of my daze, and I placed the keys in his waiting hand. He walked over and opened my door, waiting for me to be seated before closing it behind me. Yeah, you're a real gentleman, I thought. We drove in silence, the only sound provided by the purr of the engine and the GPS calling out directions to the hotel. I busied myself going over our schedule, trying to ignore the man next to me. I wanted to look at him, to study his face. I wanted to reach out and touch the slight stubble on his jaw, to tell him to pull over and touch me. All these thoughts ran through my mind, making it impossible to concentrate on the papers in front of me. The time apart hadn't lessened his hold over me at all. If anything, it made it stronger. I wanted to ask him how the last 2 weeks had been. I actually wanted to know how he was. With a sigh, I closed the folder in my lap and turned to look out the window. We must have passed ocean and Navy ships and people on the streets, but I didn't see a thing. The only thing on my mind was what was inside the car. I felt every movement, every breath. His fingers tapped along the steering wheel. The leather squeaked when he shifted in his seat. His scent filled the closed space and made it impossible to remember why I needed to resist. He completely surrounded me. I needed to be strong and be my own person, to prove that I controlled my path in life. But every part of me ached to feel him. I needed to regroup at the hotel before this conference, but with him so close, all my best intentions got away from me. "Are you okay, Miss Mills?" The sound of his voice startled me, and I turned to meet his hazel eyes, my stomach fluttering at the intensity behind them. How had I forgotten how long his lashes were? "We're here." He motioned to the hotel, and I was surprised to see I hadn't even noticed. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah," I answered quickly. "Just been a long day." He murmured, continuing to look at me. I saw his gaze flicker to my mouth, and God, I wanted him to kiss me. I missed the command of his mouth on mine, as if there were nothing in the world he wanted more than to taste me. And sometimes I suspected that might actually be true. As if drawn to him, I leaned forward in my seat. A hum of electricity buzzed between us, and his gaze flickered back to my eyes. He leaned in to meet me, and I could feel his hot breath against my mouth. Suddenly my door opened, and I jumped back into my seat, shocked to see the valet standing there expectantly, hand outstretched. I stepped out of the car, inhaling the air that wasn't permeated by his intoxicating scent. The valet took the bags, and Mr. Ryan excused himself to take a phone call while I checked us in. The hotel was packed with fellow conference attendees, and I saw several familiar faces. I had made plans to meet up with a group of other students in my program sometime on the trip. I waved to a woman I recognized. It would be great to get out with some friends while we were here. The last thing I needed was to sit alone in my hotel room and fantasize about the man down the hall. After receiving our keys and seeing that the bellhop would take our bags to our rooms, I headed to the lounge in search of Mr. Ryan. The welcome reception was in full swing, and when I scanned the large room, I found him standing next to a tall brunette. They stood close together, his head bent slightly as he listened to her. His head blocked her face from my view, and my eyes narrowed when I noticed her hand reach up and grip his forearm. She laughed at something he'd said, and he pulled away slightly, allowing me a better look. She was beautiful, with shoulder-length, straight dark hair. As I watched, she placed something in his hand and folded his fingers around it. A strange look crossed his face as he bent his head to examine the object in his palm. You have got to be kidding me. Did she just give him her room key? I watched for a moment more, and then something inside me snapped as he continued to stare at the key as if he was considering pocketing it. The thought of him looking at someone else with the same intensity, the thought of him wanting someone else at all, made my stomach twist with anger. Before I could stop myself, I was moving across the room until I stood beside them. I placed my hand on his forearm, and he blinked over to me, a surprised, questioning expression on his face. Bennett, are you ready to head upstairs? I asked quietly. His eyes widened and his mouth opened in shock. I'd never seen him look so utterly at a loss for words. And then I realized. I'd never said his name before. Bennett? I asked once more, and something flickered across his face. Slowly the corner of his mouth lifted into a smile, and our eyes locked for a moment. Turning back to her, he smiled indulgently and spoke in a voice so smooth it sent a tremor through me. Excuse us, he said, discreetly placing her key back in her hand. As you can see, I didn't come here alone. The bright pulse of victory in my chest completely overshadowed the horror I should have been feeling. He pressed his warm hand to the small of my back as he led us out of the lounge and down the hall. But the closer we got to the elevators, the more my elation was replaced with something else. I began to panic as I realized how irrationally I had acted. The reminder of our constant cat-and-mouse game exhausted me. How many times a year did he travel? And how often would he get a room key pressed into his palm? Would I be there every time to pull him back? If I wasn't, would he happily skip upstairs with someone else? And truly, who the fuck did I think I could be to him? I shouldn't care. My heart was racing, the sound of my blood rushing in my ears. 3 other couples joined us in the elevator, and I prayed I could make it to my room before I exploded. I couldn't believe what I'd just done. I glanced up to see him wearing a triumphant smirk. I took a deep breath and tried to remind myself that this was exactly why I needed to stay away. What happened down there was completely out of character for me and completely unprofessional of both of us in such a public work setting. I wanted to scream at him, to hurt him and enrage him like he had me, but it was getting harder and harder to find the will. We rode up in tense silence until the last couple stepped out, leaving us alone. I closed my eyes, just trying to breathe. But of course all I could smell was him. I didn't want him with someone else, and that feeling was so overwhelming that it took my breath away. And it was terrifying, because if I was to be honest, he could break my heart. He could break me. The elevator stopped, and with a quiet ding, the doors opened at our floor. Chloe? He prompted, his hand pressed to my back. I turned, rushing out of the elevator. Where are you going? He shouted after me. I heard his footsteps and knew there was going to be trouble. "Chloe, wait!" I couldn't outrun him forever. I wasn't even sure I wanted to anymore. "13. A million thoughts ran through my mind in that second. We couldn't keep doing this. Either this would continue or it had to stop. Now. It was interfering with my business, my sleep, my head, my fucking life. But no matter how much I tried to kid myself, I knew what I wanted. I couldn't let her leave. She practically sprinted down the hall, but I chased after her. "You can't pull something like that and then expect me to just let you walk away." "The hell I can't," she yelled over her shoulder. She reached her room and fumbled with her key before shoving it into the slot. I reached the door just as she got it open, meeting her eyes briefly before she ran in and tried to force it closed. My hand shot out, pushing it open so violently that it crashed into the wall behind it. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" she yelled. She stepped into the bathroom opposite the door and spun around to face me. "Will you quit running from me?" I followed her, my voice echoing in the small space. "If this is about that woman downstairs—" She looked impossibly more furious at my words and took a step toward me. "Don't you dare go there. I have never acted like a jealous girlfriend." She shook her head in disgust before turning to the counter and rummaging through her purse. I stared at her as she grew more and more frustrated. What else could this be about? I was completely bewildered. Her anger usually had me slammed against something and half naked by now. Here she seemed genuinely upset. "You think I would be interested in any random woman who puts her room key in my hand? What the hell kind of man do you think I am?" She slammed a brush on the counter, looking up at me furiously. "Are you serious right now? I know you've done this before. Just sex, no strings attached. I'm sure you get room keys all the time." I started to reply, because in all honesty I had been in relationships that were strictly about the sex. But this thing with Chloe hadn't been just sex for a while now. But she cut me off. "I've never done anything close to this, and I don't know how to navigate it anymore," she said, her voice getting louder with each word. "But when I'm with you, it's like nothing else matters. This thing," she continued, gesturing between us. "This isn't me. It's like I turn into a different person when I'm with you, and I hate it. I can't do it, Bennett. I don't like who I'm becoming. I work hard. I care about my job. I'm smart. None of that would matter if people knew what was happening between us. Go find someone else." "I already told you. I haven't been with anyone since we started this." "That doesn't mean you won't take a room key if it's put in your hand. What would you have done if I hadn't been there?" Without hesitation, I said, "Handed it back." But she just laughed, clearly disbelieving. "Look, this whole thing exhausts me right now. I just want to take a shower and go to bed." It was nearly impossible to imagine walking away from her and leaving this unresolved, but she'd already moved away and was turning on the shower. Just as I reached the door to the hall, I glanced back to where she stood, already surrounded by steam, watching me leave. And fuck if she didn't look as conflicted as I felt. Without thinking, I crossed the room, gripped her face between my hands, and pulled her to me. When our lips met, she made a strangled sound of surrender, immediately digging her hands into my hair. I kissed her harder, claiming her sounds as my own, making her lips mine, her taste all mine. "Let's call a truce for one night," I said, pressing 3 small kisses on her lips, one on each side and a lingering one in the middle, in the heart of her mouth. "Give me all of you for one night, no holding back. Please, Chloe. I'll leave you alone after that, but I haven't seen you in almost 2 weeks and I just need tonight." She stared at me for several painful beats, clearly struggling, and then, with a quiet, pleading sound, she reached up and pulled me to her, standing on her toes to get as close as she could. My lips were rough and unyielding, but she didn't move away, pressing her curves into me. I was lost to everything but her. We bumped into a wall, the counter, the shower door, shifting and pulling in our desperation. The room was completely filled with steam now, and nothing seemed real. I could smell, taste, and feel her, but none of it was enough. Our kisses grew deeper, our touches wilder. I grabbed her ass, her thighs, slid my hands up and over her breasts, needing every part of her in my palms simultaneously. She pushed me back against the wall, and a rush of warmth cascaded across my shoulders and down my chest, bringing me out of my haze. With our clothes still on, we had backed into the shower. We were getting soaked. We didn't care. Her hands roamed my body frantically, yanking my shirt from my pants. With shaky hands, she unbuttoned it, tearing off some buttons in her haste before sliding the wet fabric from my shoulders and tossing it outside the shower door. The wet silk of her dress clung to her, accentuating every curve. I traced the fabric along her breasts, feeling her tight nipples underneath. She moaned and brought her hand to rest on mine, guiding my movements. "Tell me what you want." My voice was rough with need. "Tell me the things you want me to do to you." "I don't know," she whispered into my mouth. "I just want to see you come apart." I wanted to tell her that she was witnessing it now, and in all honesty she'd been watching it happen for weeks. But words fell away as I skimmed my hands down her sides and up under her dress. We teased and bit at each other's mouths, the sound of the shower drowning out our moans. I slipped my hands into her panties and felt her warmth against my fingers. Needing to see more of her, I removed my fingers and slid them up to the hem of her dress. In one movement, I pulled it up and over her head and stopped dead in my tracks at the sight of what lay underneath. Sweet Jesus, she was trying to kill me. I took a step back, leaning against the shower wall for support. She stood before me, soaking wet in white lace panties that tied on the side with a satin bow. Her nipples were hard and visible beneath the matching bra, and I couldn't stop myself from reaching out to touch them. "Fuck, you're so beautiful," I said, running my fingertips along her taut breasts. A visible shiver ran through her, and my hand traveled upward, across her collarbone, along her neck, and finally to her jaw. We could fuck right here, wet and slippery against the tile, and maybe we would later. But right now I wanted to take my time. My heart sped up at the thought that we had an entire night ahead of us. No rushing out or hiding, no bitter fighting and guilt. We had one whole night alone, and I was going to spend the entire time with her, in a bed. I reached behind her and turned off the shower. She pushed against me, pressing her body further into mine. I cradled her face in my hands and kissed her deeply, my tongue sliding easily against hers. Her hips rocked against me, and I pushed the shower door open, holding on to her as we stepped out. I couldn't seem to stop touching her skin. Down her back, over the gentle curve of her backside, back up again along her sides to her breasts. I needed to feel, to taste every inch of her skin. Our kiss never broke as we made our way out of the bathroom, stumbling clumsily while we desperately tore at our remaining clothes. I kicked off my wet shoes as I backed her into the bedroom, her hands raking along my stomach as she reached for my belt. Guiding her, I was quickly free of my pants and boxers. In a rush, I kicked them to the side, where they landed in a wet pile. I traced along her ribs with my knuckles before sliding to the clasp of her bra, releasing it and practically ripping it off her body. Pulling her closer, I groaned into her mouth as her hard nipples grazed my chest. The tips of her wet hair tickled my hands as they roamed her naked back, felt electric against my skin. The room was dark, the only illumination coming from the small sliver of light that crept out from the bathroom door and the moon in the night sky. The back of her knees hit the bed, and my hands ran down to the last piece of clothing between us. My mouth moved from her lips, down to her neck, and across her breasts and torso. I placed soft, biting kisses across her stomach and finally to the white lace that hid the rest of her from view. Sliding to my knees in front of her, I looked up and met her eyes. Her hands were in my hair, running her fingers through the messy, wet strands. Reaching out, I took one delicate satin ribbon between my fingers and pulled, watching it slide off her hip. A look of confusion crossed her face as I continued running my fingers along the lace edge of the other side and did the same. The fabric fell from her body undamaged until she was completely naked before me. I might not have destroyed them, but she could be damn sure I planned to take these pretties with me. She laughed, seeming to read my mind. I guided her back so that she sat on the edge of the bed, and, still kneeling in front of her, I spread her legs. Running my hands down along the silky skin of her calves, I planted kisses along her thighs and between her legs. Her taste slid around my mouth and inside my head, erasing everything else. Fuck, what this woman did to me. Pushing her back to lie across the sheets, I finally moved up to join her, running my lips and tongue along her body, her hands still tangling in my hair, guiding where she wanted me most. I slipped my thumb into her mouth, needing her sucking on me somewhere, needing my own mouth on her breasts, her ribs, her jaw. Her sighs and moans filled the room and mingled with my own. I was harder than I could ever remember being, and I wanted to bury myself in her over and over again. I reached her mouth and dragged my wet thumb across her cheek when she pulled me down to her, every inch of our naked bodies aligned. We kissed frantically, hands seeking and grasping as we tried to get as close as possible. Our hips rocked together, my cock sliding against her soaking heat. Each pass along her clit elicited a moan. With one tiny move, I could be deep inside. And I wanted that more than anything, but I needed to hear something from her first. When she'd said my name downstairs, it had set something off inside me. I didn't understand it yet, didn't know if it meant something I wasn't completely ready to explore, but I knew I needed her to say it, to hear it was me she wanted. I needed to know that for tonight, she was mine. I am fucking dying to be inside you right now, I whispered into her ear. Her breath caught and a deep moan escaped her lips. Is that what you want? Yes, she whimpered, her voice pleading and her hips rocked higher off the bed in search of me. My tip grazed her entrance, and I clenched my jaw, wanting to prolong this. Her heels ran up and down my legs, finally locking around my waist. I took each of her hands and placed them above her head, entwining our fingers. Please, Bennett, she begged. I'm losing my mind. I lowered my head so our foreheads touched, and I finally pushed deep inside her. Oh, fuck, she moaned. Say it again. I was becoming breathless as I began to move in and out of her. Bennett, fuck. I wanted to hear it again and again. I pulled myself up on my knees and began thrusting into her more steadily, both of our hands still entwined. I can't get enough of this. I was getting close and I needed to hold out. I'd been away from her too long, and nothing I'd fantasized about while she was away compared to this. I want you like this every day, I growled against her damp skin. Like this, and bent over my desk, on your knees, sucking my dick. Why? She hissed between clenched teeth. Why do I love it when you talk to me like that? You're such a prick. I lowered myself onto her again, laughing into her neck. We moved together effortlessly, sweat-slicked skin sliding against skin. With each thrust, she raised her hips to meet me, her legs around my waist, pulling me deeper. I was so lost in her that time seemed to stop. Our hands were still tightly clasped above her head, and she began gripping tighter. She was getting close, her cries becoming louder and my name leaving her lips over and over, pushing me closer to the edge. "Give it up." My voice was ragged with the desperation I felt. I was so close, but I wanted to wait for her. "Let go, Chloe. Come all over me." "Oh, God, Bennett," she moaned. "Say something else." "Fuck, my girl got off on dirty talk." "Please." "You're so fucking slippery and hot. When you get close," I panted, "your skin flushes everywhere and your voice gets hoarse, and there is nothing more fucking perfect than your face when you come." She squeezed me harder with her legs, and I felt her breath hitch, felt her tighten around me. "Your fucking bee-stung lips go all soft and open when you pant for me, your eyes begging me to make it good, and fuck, nothing is better than the sound you make when you're finally there." That was all it took. I deepened my strokes, lifting her off the bed with every thrust. I was teetering on the edge now, and when she cried out my name, I couldn't hold back any longer. She muffled her screams against my neck as I felt her let go, clenching wildly beneath me. Nothing in the world felt as good as this, letting the rush build inside and crash over us, together, and I let go too. Afterward, I moved my face close to hers, our noses touching, breath coming out hard and fast. My mouth was dry, my muscles ached, and I was exhausted. I loosened her grip on my hands and rubbed her fingers gently, trying to bring some of the circulation back. "Holy shit," I said. Everything felt different, but completely undefined. Rolling off her, I closed my eyes, trying to block out the tangle of thoughts. Beside me, she shivered. "Cold?" I asked. "No," she answered, shaking her head. "Just really overwhelmed." I pulled her to me and reached down, dragging the blankets over us. I didn't want to leave, but I wasn't sure if I was welcome to stay either. "Me too." The silence stretched between us, as did the minutes, and I wondered if she'd fallen asleep. I shifted slightly and was surprised to hear her voice. "Don't go," she said into the darkness. I bent, kissed the top of her head, and inhaled her sweet, familiar scent. "I'm not going anywhere." Fuck, that felt good. Something warm and wet enveloped my dick again, and I groaned loudly. "Best dream ever." Dream Chloe moaned, sending a vibration along my dick and straight through me. "Chloe." I heard my own voice and jerked slightly. I'd dreamed of her hundreds of times, but this seemed so real. The warmth disappeared, and I frowned. "Don't wake up, Ben. Don't fucking wake up from this." "Say it again." A soft, throaty voice broke into my consciousness, and I forced myself to open my eyes. The room was dark, and I was lying in a strange bed. The warmth was back, and my eyes flew to my lap, where a beautiful dark head of hair moved between my open legs. She sucked my cock back into her mouth. In a rush, the entire night came back to me, the haze of sleep rapidly disappearing. Chloe? There was no way I could be lucky enough for this to be real. She must have gotten up sometime in the night to shut off the bathroom light. The room was so dark I could barely make her out. My hands drifted out to find her, my fingers tracing her lips around my cock. She bobbed her mouth up and down on me, her tongue swirling and her teeth raking lightly against my shaft with each movement. Her hand slipped to my balls, and I moaned loudly as she rolled them gently in her palm. The feeling was so intense, the realization of my dreams and reality coming together, that I didn't know how long I could last. She moved slightly, her finger lightly rubbing a spot just below, and a long hiss escaped my clenched teeth. No one had ever done that to me. I almost wanted to stop her, but the feeling was so incredible I was helpless to move. While my eyes adjusted to the light, I ran my fingers through her hair and across her face and jaw. She closed her eyes and increased the suction, bringing me closer and closer to the edge. The combination of her mouth on my dick and her finger pressing against me was unreal. But I wanted her up with me, that mouth on my mouth, sucking my lips while I buried myself in her. Sitting up, I pulled her into my lap, wrapping her legs around my hips, our naked chests pressed together. I took her face in my hands, looking into her eyes. That is the best wake-up call I've ever gotten. She laughed a little, licking her lips to a delicious shine. Reaching down, I placed my cock at her entrance and lifted her slightly. In one smooth motion, I was deep inside her. Her forehead fell to my shoulder and she rocked her hips forward, taking me further inside. Being with her in a bed was unreal. She was leisurely riding me, grinding in tiny movements. She kissed along every inch of the right side of my neck, sucking and pulling at my skin. Short utterances punctuated every circuit of her hips. "Like being on top of you," she breathed. "Feel how deep you are? Feel that?" "Yeah." "Want faster?" I shook my head, absolutely lost. No, God, no. For a while she stayed slow, tiny circles, teeth all up and down my neck. But then she shifted closer, whispering, "I'm gonna come, Bennett." And instead of releasing a string of curse words to describe what hearing that did to me, I bit her shoulder, sucked a bruise into her skin. Working me harder now, she began to talk. Words I could barely process. Words about my body inside her, her need for me. Words about my taste and how wet she was. Words about wanting me to come, needing me to come. With each swivel of her hips, the pressure began to build. I gripped her tighter, fearing briefly that I would leave bruises every time I moved my hands, and quickened my thrusts. She moaned and writhed above me, and just when I thought I couldn't hold out any more, she called my name again, and I felt her begin to spasm around me. The intensity of her orgasm brought on my own, and I moved my face to her neck, pressing a loud groan into her skin. She collapsed against me, and I lowered us both to the bed. We were sweaty and panting and utterly exhausted, and she looked fucking perfect. I pulled her to me, her back pressed against my chest, and wrapped my arms around her, entangling my legs with hers. She mumbled something I couldn't make out, but was asleep before I could ask her. Something had shifted tonight, and my last thought as my eyes closed was that there would be plenty of time to talk tomorrow. But as the early morning sunlight began to creep under the dark curtain, I realized with an uneasy feeling that tomorrow was already here. "14. Consciousness fluttered on the edge of my sleep-filled mind, and I tried to force it away. I didn't want to wake up. I was warm and comfortable and content. Vague visions of my dream passed behind my closed eyes as I snuggled into the warmest, best-smelling blanket I'd ever slept in. It snuggled back. Something warm pressed against me, and my eyes fluttered open to see a head of familiar messy hair inches from my face. 100 images flashed through my mind in that second as the reality of last night came crashing down on my muddled brain. Holy shit! It was real. My heart rate quickened as I lifted my head slightly to see the beautiful man wrapped around me. His head lay on my chest, his perfect mouth parted slightly, releasing puffs of warm air across my bare breasts. His long body lay flush against mine, our legs tangled together, and his strong arms wrapped tightly around my torso. He stayed. The intimacy of our position hit with a crushing force that actually took my breath away. He didn't just stay. He clung to me. I struggled to find my breath and not panic. I was keenly aware of each inch of where our skin touched. I felt the powerful thump of his heartbeat against my chest. His cock was pressed against my thigh, semi-hard in his sleep. My fingers burned to touch him. My lips ached to press against his hair. It was too much. He was too much. Something changed last night, and I wasn't sure I was ready to deal with it. I didn't know what that change entailed, but it was there. In every move, every touch, every word, and every kiss, we had been together. Nobody had ever made me feel that way, as if my body were made to fit his. I'd been with other men, but with him I felt as if I was being carried away by a hidden undertow, completely unable to change the course. I closed my eyes, trying to quell the sense of panic that was building. I didn't regret what happened. It was, as always, intense and easily the best sex I'd ever had. I just needed a few minutes alone before I could face him. Placing one hand into his hair and the other on his back, I managed to roll him off me. He began to stir, and I froze, holding him close and silently willing him to go back to sleep. He mumbled my name before his breath evened out again, and I slipped out from underneath him. I watched him sleep for a moment, the panic receding somewhat, and was once again struck by just how gorgeous he was. Stilled by sleep, his features were tranquil and peaceful, and so very different from any expression he ever wore around me. A thick curl had fallen down across his forehead, and my fingers itched to brush it back. Long lashes, perfect cheekbones, full pouty lips, and a stubble-covered jaw. Christ on a cracker, he's pretty. I started to make my way to the bathroom, but caught my reflection in the mirror over the bedroom vanity. Wow. Freshly fucked. That was definitely how I looked. Leaning in, I examined the small red scrapes that were scattered along my neck, shoulders, breasts, and stomach. A small bite mark was visible on the underside of my left breast, a hickey on my shoulder. Glancing down, I ran my fingers along the red marks on my inner thigh. My nipples hardened as I recalled the feeling of his unshaven face brushing along my skin. My hair was a wild and tangled mess, and I bit my lip as I remembered his hands twisted in it, the way he pulled me first into his kiss and then onto his cock. Not helping. I was jolted out of my thoughts by a voice thick with sleep. Awake and freaking out already? Turning, I caught a glimpse of his naked body as he twisted in the sheets and sat up, before pulling them over his hips and leaving his torso bare. I didn't think I would ever get tired of looking at and feeling his broad, muscular chest, washboard abs, and tantalizing happy trail that led to the most gloriously hung man ever seen. When my eyes finally reached his face, I scowled at his lopsided grin. "Caught you looking," he murmured, rubbing a hand over his jaw. I wasn't sure whether to smile or roll my eyes. Seeing him rumpled and vulnerable in his half-awake state was disorienting. We never bothered to close the heaviest drapes last night, and now sunlight streamed in, blindingly bright against the tangle of white linens. He looked so different. Still my asshole boss, but also someone else now. A man, in my bed, looking like he was ready for round 4? 5? I couldn't keep track. And as his eyes raked over every inch of me, I remembered that I, too, was completely naked. In this moment, his expression was as intense as his touch. I briefly wondered if he continued to look at me like that, would my skin ignite? Would I feel his touch on my flesh the same as when he put his hands on me? I fixed my expression into something I hoped camouflaged that I was mentally cataloging every inch of his skin, and bent over to retrieve his white undershirt off the floor. It had been in front of the air conditioner all night and was a little cold, but thankfully mostly dry. When I slipped the soft cotton over my head, I inhaled the sagey scent of his skin, and then emerged, catching his dark stare. His tongue darted out to wet his lips. "Come here," he growled quietly. I moved to the bed, intending to sit beside him, but he pulled me so I straddled his thighs and said, "Tell me what you're thinking." He wanted me to condense 1,000,000 thoughts into a single sentence? The man was insane. So I opened my mouth and let the first thought out. "You said you haven't been with anyone since we were first together." I stared at his collarbone so I wouldn't have to look him in the eye. "Is that true?" Finally, I looked up. He nodded and slipped his fingers beneath the undershirt, running his hands slowly from my hips to my waist. "Why?" I asked. He closed his eyes, shook his head once. "I haven't wanted anyone else." I wasn't sure how to interpret that. Did he mean he hadn't met anyone he wanted but was open to it? "Are you usually monogamous if you're sleeping with someone?" He shrugged. "If that's the expectation." Bennett kissed along my shoulder, to my collarbone and up my neck. I reached around him, grabbing the complimentary bottle of water on the nightstand and taking a sip before handing it to him. He finished it in a few long swallows. "Thirsty?" I was, feeling a little hungry now. "Not surprising, we haven't eaten in I stopped as he wiggled his eyebrows and grinned. I rolled my eyes, but they fell closed as he leaned forward and kissed me once, sweetly on the lips. "Is monogamy the expectation here?" I asked. "After what happened last night, I think you need to tell me." I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't even sure I could be with him like this, let alone be monogamous about it. The idea of how that would work made my head spin. Would we actually be friendly? Would he say good morning and mean it? Would he feel safe criticizing my work? He spread his fingers over my lower back, pressing me into his side and pulling me out of my rambling thoughts. "Never take this off," he whispered. "Deal." I leaned back to give his mouth better access to my throat. "I'll wear this and nothing else down to the poster session this morning." His laugh was low and playful. "Like hell you will." "What time is it?" I asked, trying to see behind him to the clock. "Don't give a shit." His fingertips found my breast and slipped back and forth over the soft underside. But in the process of leaning away from him, I'd exposed the skin just above his hip. What the hell? Was that a tattoo? What is... I could barely form the words. Pushing him away slightly, I looked up to meet his eyes before returning them to the mark. Right below his hip bone was a string of black ink, words written in what I guessed was French. How the hell had I missed that? I thought back briefly to all the times we'd been together. We'd always been rushed, or in the dark, or in only a state of semi-undress. "It's a tattoo," he said, bemused, pulling back a bit and trailing his fingers over my navel. "I know it's a tattoo, but what does it say?" Mr. Serious Business had a fucking tattoo. Another piece of the man I thought I knew fell away. "It says, je ne regrette rien." My eyes flew to his, my blood heating at the sound of his voice dissolving into a perfect French accent. "What did you say?" He definitely smirked. "Je ne regrette rien." He spoke each word slowly, emphasizing every syllable. It had to be the sexiest fucking thing I'd ever heard. Between that and the tattoo and the fact that he was completely naked under me, I was going to spontaneously combust. "Isn't that a song?" He nodded. "It's a song, yes." Laughing quietly, he said, "You might think I'd regret that one drunken night in Paris, thousands of miles from home, without a single friend in the city. I decided to go get a tattoo. But no, I don't even regret that. Say it again, I whispered. He moved closer, hips rolling against mine, his breath hot in my ear, and whispered it again. Je ne regrette rien. Do you understand? I nodded. Say something else. My breasts were heaving with each labored breath, my sensitive nipples grazing against the cotton of his shirt. Bending slightly, he kissed my ear, saying, Je suis à toi. His voice was strained and gravelly as he held himself up for me, and I put us both out of our misery, sinking down over him with a groan and loving the depth of this position again. He whispered a single profane syllable over and over, staring up at me. Instead of clutching my hips, his hands fisted the shirt at my sides. It was so easy, so natural between us that it somehow just added to the space of uneasiness that I couldn't seem to shake. Instead of focusing on that, I focused on his quiet grunts into my mouth. I focused on the way he sat us up abruptly and sucked on my breasts through his shirt, exposing the pink beneath. I got lost in his urgent fingers on my hips and thighs, his forehead pressed to my collarbone as he got closer. I got lost in the feel of his thighs under me, his hips moving faster and harder to meet every one of my movements. Flipping me over, he spread his hand flat on my chest, hips stilling. Your heart is pounding. Tell me how fucking good this feels. Instinctively, I relaxed when I looked up at his cocky grin. Did he know I needed some reminder of who we'd been less than a day ago? You're doing that talking thing again. Stop. His smile widened. You love my talking. You especially love it when it coincides with my dick being in you. I rolled my eyes. What gave that away? The orgasms? The way I ask you for it? Good sleuthing. He winked, pulling my foot up to his shoulder and kissing the inside of my ankle. Have you always been this way? I asked, tugging uselessly on his hips. I hated to admit it, but I wanted him moving. When he was still, it teased. It was sore. It felt incomplete. When he moved, I just wanted time to freeze. I pity the females whose discarded egos litter the path. Bennett shook his head, leaning over me and propping himself up on his hands. Mercifully, he started moving, hips shifting forward and up, pushing deep into me. My eyes rolled closed. He hit the perfect spot again and again and again. Look at me, he whispered. I looked up, watched the sweat bead on his brow, his lips part as he stared at my mouth. Shoulder muscles bunched as he moved. His torso shone with a thin layer of sweat, and I watched where he moved in and out of me. I'm not sure what I said when he pulled almost all the way out and then pushed hard back into me, but it was quiet and filthy and instantly forgotten as he pounded into me. You make me feel cocky. It's the way you react to me that makes me feel like a fucking god. How can you not see that? I didn't answer, and clearly he didn't expect me to. His gaze and the fingers of one hand drifting down my neck and over my breasts. He found a particularly sensitive spot, and I gasped. It looks like someone bit you here, he said, his thumb sweeping across his bite mark. Did you like it? I swallowed, pushing up into him. Yes. Fucking wicked girl. My hands slid over his shoulders and down his chest, across his abs and to the muscles of his hips, my thumb running back and forth over his tattoo. I like this, too. His movements grew jagged and forceful. Oh, fuck, Chloe, I can't. I won't last long. Hearing his voice so desperate and out of control only intensified my need for him. I closed my eyes, focusing on the delicious feeling beginning to spread throughout my body. I was so close, teetering right on the edge. Reaching between us, my fingers found my clit and I began to rub it slowly. Tilting his head, he looked down at my hand and swore. "Oh, fuck." His voice was desperate, his breath coming out in deep pants. "Touch yourself. Just like that. Let me fucking see you." His words were all I needed, and with one last brush of my fingers, I felt my orgasm overtake me. I came hard, clenching around him, the nails of my free hand digging into his back. He cried out, his body seizing as he came inside me. My whole body shook in the aftermath, tiny tremors continuing even as my orgasm faded. I clung to him as he stilled, his body sinking against mine. He kissed my shoulder and my neck before placing a single kiss to my lips. Our eyes met briefly, and then he rolled off me. "Christ, woman," he said, exhaling a heavy breath, forcing a laugh. "You're going to kill me." We rolled to our sides in unison, heads on our pillows, and when our eyes met, I couldn't look away. I lost every hope I ever had that the next time would be less powerful, or that our connection would somehow melt away if we just got it out of our systems. This one night with a truce didn't dim anything. I already wanted to move closer, kiss the stubble on his jaw, and pull him back over me. As I gazed at him, it became clear to me that when this ended, it would fucking hurt. Fear gripped my heart, and the panic from last night returned, bringing an uncomfortable silence with it. I sat up, pulling the sheets with me and up to my chin. Oh, shit. His hand shot out, wrapping around my arm. "Chloe, I can't. We probably need to get ready," I interrupted before he finished that sentence. It could be the beginning of a million forms of heartbreak. "We have a poster session in 20 minutes. He looked confused for a moment before speaking. "I don't have any dry clothes in here. I don't even know where my room is." I fought a blush as I remembered how quickly everything had happened last night. "Right. I'll use your key to go get you something." I showered quickly and wrapped a thick towel around myself, wishing that I would have had the sense to bring one of the hotel bathrobes in here with me. With a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped out. He was sitting on the bed, and his eyes rose to meet mine as I entered the room. "I just need—" I trailed off, motioning to my bag. He nodded but made no move to speak. I was usually never self-conscious about my body, but standing here in nothing but a towel, knowing that he was watching me, I felt uncharacteristically shy. I grabbed a few things and rushed by him, not stopping until I was once again safely behind the bathroom door. I dressed faster than I thought possible, deciding I would pull my hair back and finish the rest later. Grabbing the key cards from the counter, I returned to the bedroom. He hadn't moved. Sitting on the edge of the bed with his elbows resting on his thighs, he appeared lost in thought. What was he thinking? All morning I'd been a nervous wreck, my emotions shifting wildly from one extreme to the other. But he seemed so calm, so sure. But what was he sure of? What had he decided? "Do you have anything in particular you want me to bring you?" When he lifted his head, he looked slightly surprised, as if the thought hadn't occurred to him. I just have a few meetings this afternoon, right?" I nodded. "Whatever you pick will be fine." It only took me a second to locate his room. It was right next door. Great. Now I could imagine him in a bed just through the wall from mine. His bags were already there, and I paused briefly, realizing I would have to go through his luggage. Lifting the largest one and placing it on the bed, I opened it. His scent hit me and caused a heavy pang of desire to wash through me. I began looking through the neatly packed items. Everything about him was so tidy and organized, and it made me wonder what his home looked like. I'd never thought about it much, but I suddenly wondered if I would ever see it. If I would ever see his bed. I paused as I realized that I wanted to. Would he want me to? It struck me that I was stalling. and I continued searching through his clothes before finally settling on a charcoal helmet-lang suit, white dress shirt, black silk tie, boxers, socks, and shoes. Putting everything back where it belonged, I gathered up his clothing and headed for my room. I was unable to stifle my nervous laughter as I walked into the hall, shaking my head over the sheer absurdity of the situation. Thankfully, I managed to compose myself as I reached my door. I made it 2 steps inside before I froze. He stood in front of the open window, awash in morning sunlight. Each beautiful line of his chiseled form was accentuated in perfect detail by the shadows cast across his body. A towel hung indecently low on his hips, and there, poking out just above it, was the tattoo. "See something you like?" I reluctantly returned my attention to his face. My eyes drifted back down to his hip as if pulled by a magnet. "I said, did you see something you like?" He crossed the room, stopping just in front of me. "I heard you," I said, glaring, "and no, just lost in thought." "And what exactly were you thinking?" He reached out, moving a piece of my damp hair behind my ear. Just that simple touch caused my stomach to jump. "That we have a schedule to keep." He moved a step closer. "Why don't I believe you?" "Because you're self-absorbed?" I suggested, meeting his gaze. He quirked an eyebrow and watched me for a moment before taking his clothing from my hands and placing it on the bed. Before I could move, he pulled the towel from his hips and tossed it to the side. Sweet Mother of God. If there was a finer specimen of man on this earth, I'd pay big money to see it. Picking up his boxers, he began to step into them before he stopped, looking at me. "Didn't you just say we had a schedule to keep?" he questioned, eyeing me humorously. "Unless, of course, you see something you like." Son of a... I narrowed my eyes and turned quickly, returning to the bathroom to finish getting ready. As I dried my hair, I couldn't get past the unsettling feeling that he was trying to say something more important than, "Look at my naked body some more." Before I could even untangle my own emotions, I was trying to guess at his. Was I worried he would want to leave? Or stay? When I returned to the bedroom, he was already dressed and waiting, looking out the large window. He turned, walked to me, and placed his warm hands on my face, staring at me intently. "I need you to listen to me." I swallowed. "Okay." "I don't want to walk out that door and lose what we found in this room." His simple words rocked me. He wasn't declaring, he wasn't promising, but he said exactly what I'd needed to hear. We might not know what was happening, but we wouldn't leave it unfinished. Letting out a shaky breath, I brought my hands to his chest. "I don't either, but I also don't want your career to swallow mine." "I don't want that either." I nodded, feeling like words tangled my thoughts and I was unable to think of anything articulate to add. "Okay then," he said, looking me up and down. "Let's go." 15. The theme of the conference this year was the next generation of marketing strategy, and as a way to embrace the new generation, the organizers had scheduled a poster session for students getting their degrees. Most students from Chloe's program were here, standing straight and eager beside their poster boards. In fact, presentation at this venue was considered a requirement for Chloe's scholarship, but I had applied for an exception for her, given the size and confidential nature of the Papadakis account, her primary project. No other student here was managing a $1 million deal. The scholarship board had been happy to grant the exception, practically drooling over the prospect of putting Chloe's success story in their program brochure once the design was completed, signed, and released publicly. But, Although she had no presentation at the meeting, she insisted on walking through every aisle and looking at every poster. Given that I was apparently incapable of being more than 4 fucking feet away from her, and didn't have a meeting until 10, I followed her around the entire time, counting posters, 576, and staring at her ass, perky, fun to spank, currently wrapped in black wool. She'd mentioned in the elevator that her best friend Julia provided a majority of the wardrobe I loved/hated. This morning's selection of a fitted pencil skirt and deep blue blouse was now also on my list. I tried a couple of times to convince Chloe that we needed to go back to the room to get something, but she'd only raised an eyebrow and asked, "Get something or get some?" I'd ignored her, but now I wished I'd admitted I needed one more round before conferencing. I wondered if she'd have gone for it. "Would you have gone back to the room?" I asked into her ear as she carefully read an undergraduate poster on a rebranding idea for some small cellular company. Graphs were taped to the poster board, for crying out loud. "Shh. Chloe, you're not going to learn anything from this poster. Let's go get a cup of coffee, and maybe a blowjob in the bathroom." "Your father told me it was impossible to predict where I'd get my best ideas, and to read everything I could find. Besides, these are my student colleagues." I waited, toying with a cufflink, but she apparently wasn't going to address the latter part of what I'd said. "My dad doesn't know what he's talking about." She laughed, appropriately. Dad had been on every top 25 list of CEOs practically since before I was born. "It doesn't have to be a blowjob. I could fuck you against a wall," I whispered, clearing my throat and looking around to be sure no one was near enough to hear. "Or I could lay you down on the floor, spread you wide, and make you come against my tongue." She shivered, smiled at the student near the next poster, and walked closer to read it. The man held his hand out to me. "Excuse me, but are you Bennett Ryan?" I nodded, distracted as I shook his hand, watching Chloe move farther away. The aisle we were in was practically deserted, but for the students standing near the posters. Even they had begun to wander off to more interesting areas of the room, where larger companies, conference sponsors mostly, had put together shiny, trademark-filled posters in the interest of getting the inaugural student-led session off the ground successfully. Chloe bent and wrote something on her notepad. Rebranding for Jenkins Financial? I stared at her hand and then up at her face, fixed in a thoughtful expression. The Jenkins Financial account wasn't one of hers. It wasn't even one I handled. It was a small account, occasionally half-ass managed by one of the junior executives. Did she actually know how much it was struggling with the dinosaur marketing campaign we had? Before I could ask, she turned and moved on to the next poster, and I was mesmerized with Chloe at work. I'd never let myself watch her so openly. The surreptitious stalking I had done only told me she was brilliant and driven, but I never realized the breadth of her company knowledge before. I wanted to compliment her somehow, but the words got tangled in my head and a strange defensiveness surged in my chest, as if to praise her work would somehow break strategy. "Your penmanship has improved." She smiled up at me, clicking the end of her pen. "Fuck off." My dick twitched in my pants. "You're wasting my time here." "Then why don't you go glad handsome executives over in the reception hall? They have breakfast there, those little chocolate muffins you pretend not to like." "Because it's not what I feel like eating." A small grin pulled at her lips. She watched my face as another student introduced herself to me. "I've followed your career ever since I can remember," the woman said, breathless. "I heard you speak here last year." I smiled, shook her hand as briefly as I could without appearing rude. "Thanks for saying hello." We moved to the end of the aisle, and I wrapped my hand around Chloe's elbow. "I have 1 more hour until I have a meeting. Do you have any idea what you do to me?" Finally, she looked up. Her pupils were so large her eyes turned nearly black, and she licked her lips into a wet, decadent pout. "I suppose I need you to take me upstairs so you can show me." Chloe was still looking for a new pair of panties when I was already 5 minutes late to my 1 o'clock. It was with Ed Gugliotti, a marketing executive for a smaller Minneapolis firm. We used Ed's firm to subcontract smaller jobs, and had a more significant project we were thinking of passing off to him to see how they handled it. As I zipped my pants, I reminded myself that Ed was himself pathologically late. Except this time he wasn't. He was already waiting for me in one of the hotel meeting rooms, 2 of his junior people sitting beside him, eager smiles in place. I hated being late. "Ed," I said, greeting him with a handshake. He introduced me to his team, Daniel and Sam. They shook my hand in turn, but by the time I got to Sam, his attention was behind me at the door. Chloe had walked in, hair down now, looking wildly beautiful but professional, miraculously hiding the fact that she'd just had a screaming orgasm atop the desk in her hotel room. Gugliotti and his men watched in rapt silence as she walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down beside me, turning to give me a small smile. Her lips were red and swollen, and a faint red mark bloomed on her jaw. Stubble burn. Too right. I cleared my throat until everyone finally looked back at me. Let's get started. It was a simple meeting, and the kind of thing I'd done 1,000 times. I described the account in the most general, non-confidential terms, and, of course, Gugliotti told me he thought his team could come up with something great. After meeting the men he'd assigned to it, I agreed. We planned to meet again the following day, when I would present the account in its entirety and officially hand it over. The meeting was over in less than 15 minutes, giving me time before my 2 o'clock. I looked over at Chloe and raised an eyebrow in silent question. "Food," she said with a laugh. "Let's get some food." The rest of the afternoon had been productive, but I'd been entirely on autopilot, and if someone had asked me specifics about the meetings, it would have taken me a good long time to remember any details. Thank God for Chloe and her obsessive note-taking. I'd been approached by many colleagues, had likely clasped 100 hands over the afternoon, but the only touch I remembered was hers. She distracted me endlessly, and what bothered me was that it was different here than usual. It was work, but it was a completely new world, one where we could pretend our circumstances were whatever we wanted them to be. The itch to be near her was even greater than it was when I had to keep my distance. Looking back to the evening keynote speaker at the podium, I tried unsuccessfully once again to redirect my thoughts to something productive. I was sitting up front. I had given the keynote last year at this very conference, and yet I somehow couldn't find a way to engage. I saw her shift in my peripheral vision, and instinctively I looked across the table at her. When our eyes met, every other sound blended together, floating around me but never breaking into my consciousness. Without thinking, I leaned toward her, she leaned toward me, and a tiny grin flickered across her mouth. I thought about this morning, and how transparent she'd been in her panic. By contrast, I'd felt strangely calm, as if everything we'd done had been leading to that precise moment when we could both see how easy it was just to be. A cell phone ringing somewhere behind me broke me from my trance, causing me to look away. Quickly sitting back in my chair, I was shocked to see how far forward I'd actually been leaning. I looked around and stopped dead as a pair of unfamiliar eyes met mine. This stranger had no idea who we were, or that Chloe worked for me. He'd only glanced at us and quickly looked away. But in that moment, every bit of guilt I'd been suppressing hit me. Everyone knew who I was. No one here knew her. And if it ever got out that we were fucking, the judgment of an entire community would follow her around for the rest of her career. A quick glance back at Chloe told me she could see panic written all over my face. I spent the rest of the lecture staring forward, not giving her another glance. "Are you okay?" she asked in the elevator, breaking the heavy silence that had accompanied us for 14 floors. "Yeah, just—" I scratched the back of my neck and avoided her eyes. "Just thinking." "I'm going out with some friends tonight." "That sounds like a good idea." "You have dinner with Stevenson and Newberry at 7. I think they're meeting you at that sushi place you like in the gas lamp." "I know," I said, relaxing as we fell into the familiar details of work. "What's their assistant's name again? She always comes." "Andrew." I looked over at her, confused. That's a touch manlier than I was expecting. "They have a new assistant." How on earth did she know that? She smiled. "He was sitting next to me at the keynote and asked if I'd be at the dinner tonight." I wondered if his was the pair of unfamiliar eyes that caught me staring at Chloe, and he asked because of the way I looked at her. I stuttered out a few sounds before she interrupted me. "I told him I had other plans." My unease returned. I wanted her with me tonight, and soon she wouldn't be my intern anymore. Could I be her lover then? Could I still be her boss now? "Did you want to come?" She shook her head, looking up at the doors as we reached the 30th floor. "I think I should probably go do my own thing." The short drive back from the restaurant was quiet and lonely, with only my jumbled thoughts to keep me company. I made my way through the large lobby to the elevator and robotically moved to Chloe's room before remembering I wasn't actually staying with her. I couldn't remember which room was mine, and tried 3 on the floor before giving up and checking back in at the reception desk. When I returned, I realized my room was just next to hers. It was a mirror image of her room, but completely different in all of the ways that couldn't be seen. This shower hadn't washed away our pretenses last night. We hadn't slept together, curled around each other in this bed. These walls hadn't been filled with the sounds of her coming apart beneath me. This desk wasn't broken from a late-morning quickie. I checked my phone and saw that I had 2 missed calls from my brother. Great. Normally, I would have already spoken to my father and brother several times, telling them about meetings or potential clients I'd met. So far, I hadn't talked to either of them once. I'd been afraid they would see right through me and know that my head was not in the game this week. It was after 11, and I wondered if she was still with her friends, or was she back already? Maybe she was lying there awake, obsessing about all of the same things I was. Without thinking, I reached for the phone and dialed her room. It rang 4 times before a generic voicemail answered. I hung up and tried her cell. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Ryan?" I winced. She was with other students. Of course, she wouldn't call me Bennett now. "Hi, I was just making sure you had a way to get back to the hotel." Her laugh came through the line, muted by the sound of voices and the pulsing of loud music all around her. "There are about 70 cabs waiting outside. I'll just grab one of those when we're done." "When will that be?" "When Melissa finishes this drink, and probably another, and when Kim decides she's done dancing with every filthy man-whore here. So you can expect me back sometime between now and tomorrow morning at 8. "Are you being a wise ass?" I asked, feeling a grin spread across my face. "Yes." "Fine," I said, exhaling heavily. "Just text me when you get back safe." She was quiet for a beat and then said, "I will." I hung up and dropped my phone on the bed beside me, staring at the floor for probably an hour. I didn't even know what to do with myself. Finally, I got up and walked back downstairs. I was still in the lobby when she came back at 2 in the morning, cheeks bright and smile firmly in place as she dropped her phone into her purse. My phone buzzed in my hand and I glanced down. I'm back safe. I watched her walk past the reception desk and directly toward where I sat near the bank of elevators. She stopped when she saw me, bleary-eyed in my rumpled suit. I was sure my hair was a fucking joke because I'd been worried sick. I suddenly had no idea what I was doing waiting for her like an anxious spouse. I only knew I couldn't be the one to decide we wouldn't work, because deep down, I wanted to figure it out. "Bennett?" she said, glancing at her friend, who waved and walked to the elevator. I didn't give a damn what the friend was thinking, but I could feel her stare on us until she got into the elevator. Chloe was wearing a tiny black dress and heels I wanted to petition become a uniform until her internship ended. Thin straps crisscrossed all the way from her pink-painted toes midway up her shins. I wanted to peel the dress from her body and fuck her into the couch, gripping those heels for leverage. "Hey," I mumbled, mesmerized by the miles and miles of bare leg in front of me. She walked closer, stopping just a few inches away. "What are you doing down here?" "Waiting." I struggled to hide how she affected me, how my present thoughts could barely be torn from the fantasy of my fists in her hair, the way my thumbs could completely cover her small pink nipples, or how her clit was the softest part of any body I'd ever touched. I wanted to taste her from her toes to her earlobes, telling her every thought I had on the way. "Are you drunk?" I shook my head. "Not the way you mean." "Someone saw me looking at you earlier." "I know." She reached up, ran her fingers through my hair. "At the keynote. I saw your face." I panicked. Chloe didn't say anything in response to that. She just laughed a soft, husky sound. "I'm not worried about how it looks for me. I'm worried about how it looks for you," I said. I heard her sharp inhale, felt her fingers tighten in my hair. When I looked up at her face, she looked bewildered. How could she not know how infatuated I'd become? I was sure she could see it every time I looked at her. As always, I wanted to grip her from behind, spank her when she made a sound, pull her hair when I came, bite her breast again, drag my teeth over her spine, pinch the back of her thigh, and then smooth it over with the softest touch. But I also wanted to watch her sleep, and then watch her wake up and see me, and gauge her feelings from that first unfiltered reaction. I was starting to see that this wasn't just sex, and it wasn't just working something out of my system. Sex was the fastest route to the deeper possession I needed. I was falling in love with her, and falling too fast and hard to easily find any footing. It was scary as fuck. I decided to give her the truth. "I need another night." She sucked in a breath and stared, and only then did it occur to me that she could be feeling something very different than I was. "Feel free to say no, I ran a hand through my hair and looked up at her. "I just would really like to be with you again tonight." "Greedy, aren't you?" "You have no idea." Upstairs in her room, between her sheets, and with her body coiled tight and sweet, sucking me in, everything else slipped away. Her scent and noises clouded my brain, made my thrusting erratic and hard. She was drenched, all of her, skin outside and flesh inside, slick and pulling me deeper. Her legs clamped around my hips and she flipped me over with a laugh, riding me with her back arched away and her head thrown back, fingers digging in my abdomen, anchoring herself in me. Her skin shone and I sat up underneath her, needing to feel the slide of her chest over mine as she slithered and slid. I pushed her back again, hovering over her once more this time with her legs on my shoulders and her mouth quivering as she struggled to find words. Her nails dug into my back and I hissed, telling her more and yes and wanting her to mark me, to leave something that would still be there tomorrow. She came once, and then again, and once more, and pulled at her hair looking wild and untamed. I collapsed on her, incoherently stringing words together as I came, trying to tell her what we both already knew, that whatever happened outside of this room was irrelevant. 16. We slowly returned from orbit, and with limbs tangled in the sheets, talked for hours about our day, about the meeting with Gugliotti, about his dinner and my night out with friends. We talked about the broken desk and that I only packed enough underwear for a week, so he couldn't ruin any more. We talked about everything except the havoc he was wreaking on my heart. I ran a finger down his chest and he stilled it with his hand, bringing it to his lips and saying, "It's nice to talk to you." I laughed, pushing his hair off his forehead. "You talk to me every day. And when I say talk, I mean yell, shout, slam doors, pout." With his fingertips, he drew spirals over my bare stomach, distracting me. "You know what I mean." I did. I knew exactly what he meant, and I wanted to find a way to stretch this moment right there into eternity. "So tell me something." He raised his eyes to my face, smiling a little nervously. "What do you want to know?" "Honestly, I think I want to know everything. But let's start small. Give me the history of Bennett's women." He ran a long finger across his eyebrow and repeated in a laugh, "Let's start small, right?" He cleared his throat and then looked at me. "A few in high school, some in college, some in grad school, some after grad school, and then one long-term relationship when I lived in France." "Details?" I twisted a strand of his hair around my finger, hoping I wasn't pushing him too much. But to my surprise, he answered without hesitation. "Her name was Sylvie. She was an attorney at a small firm in Paris. We were together for 3 years and broke up a few months before I moved home." "Was that why you moved home?" A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "No." "Did she break your heart?" The smile turned into a full-on smirk directed at me. "No, Chloe." "Did you break hers?" Why was I even asking this? Did I want him to say yes? I knew he was capable of breaking hearts. I was actually fairly certain he would break mine. He bent to kiss me then, sucking on my lower lip for a few moments before whispering, "No, we just didn't work anymore. My romantic life was entirely without drama. Until you." I laughed. "Happy to change up the pattern." I could feel his laugh in the vibrations along my skin as he kissed up my neck. "And oh, you do." Long fingers made their way down my stomach to my hips and finally between my legs. "Your turn." "To have an orgasm? Yes, please." He circled a lazy finger around my clit before sliding it inside me. He knew my body better than I did. When did that happen? "No," he murmured. "Your turn to spill your history." No way can I think about anything when you're doing that. With a kiss to my shoulder, he moved his hand back to my stomach, drawing circles there once again. I pouted, but he missed it, watching his fingers on me instead. God, there have been so many men. Where will I ever begin? "Chloe," he warned. "A couple in high school, one in college." "You've only had sex with 3 men?" I pulled back to look at him. "Hello, Einstein. I've had sex with 4 men." A cocky grin spread across his face. "Right. And am I the best by an embarrassingly wide margin?" "Am I?" His grin disappeared and he blinked, surprised. "Yes." It was sincere. It made something inside me melt into a tiny warm hum. I reached to kiss his chin, trying to hide what that information did to me. "Good." Kissing along his shoulder, I moaned happily. I loved his taste, loved to inhale that clean sage smell of his. Digging my fingers into his hair, I tugged him down so I could nibble at his jaw, his neck, his shoulders. He held himself very still, propped over me, very clearly not kissing me back. The hell? He inhaled to speak and then closed his mouth again. Somehow I managed to drag my mouth away long enough to ask, "What?" "I realize you think I'm just a filthy man-whore, but it does actually matter to me." "What matters to—" "I want to hear you say it." I stared at him and he stared back, irises growing a familiar shade of angry brown-green. Mentally rifling through the last few minutes, I tried to understand what he was talking about. Oh, yes. His brows pulled together. "Yes, what, Miss Mills?" Heat pulsed through me. His voice was different when he said that. Sharp, commanding, hot as hell. "Yes, you're the best by a very embarrassing margin." "That's better." "At least so far." He rolled on top of me, grabbing my wrists and pinning them above my head. "Don't tease." "Don't tease. Please," I said, breathless, his cock pressed into my thigh. I wanted it higher. I wanted it pushing inside me. "Teasing is all we do." As if to prove me wrong, he reached down, grabbing his length and guiding himself into me, pulling my leg around his hip. Holding very still, he stared down at me. His upper lip twitched. "Please move," I whispered. "You'd like that?" "Yes." "And if I don't?" I bit my lip, tried to glare at him. He smiled, growling, "This is teasing." "Please?" I tried to move my hips, but he followed my movements so I couldn't gain any friction. "Chloe, I never tease you. I fuck the sense out of you." I laughed, and his eyes fell closed when I did, my body constricting him even more. "Not that you have much sense to begin with," he said, biting my neck. "Now tell me how good I make you feel." Something in his voice, some vulnerability or dip in its strength as the sentence ended, told me he wasn't playing around. "No one has ever made me come before, not with hands or mouth or anything else." He'd been holding still before, though the telltale signs of strain had been apparent. His shoulders trembled and his breath came out in shallow pants, as if his entire body wanted to explode into a wild tangle in the sheets. But when I said this, he completely froze. "No one?" "Only you." I stretched to nibble his jaw. "I'd say that puts you a bit ahead of the field." He exhaled my name as his hips moved back and then forward, and again back and forward. The conversation was done. His mouth found mine, and then my chin, and my jaw, and my ears. His hand moved up my side to my breast, and finally to my face. And when I thought we were both lost to the rhythm and I could feel my climax just beyond me, but so close, and I dug both heels into his ass, needing more and faster and all of him, he whispered, "I wish I'd known that." "Why?" I managed, an exhale carrying the sound barely past my lips. "Faster," my body screamed. "More." "Would it have changed how big an asshole you were?" He unwrapped my legs from around him, flipped me over and up onto my knees. "I don't know. I just wish I'd known," he grunted, pushing into me once again. "Jesus. So fucking deep like this." His movements were so fluid, like dancing, rippling water, like the sliding of the sunlight across a room. The mattress springs groaned beneath us, the force of his thrusts pushing me farther up the bed. "Almost." I clutched at the sheets, begged him to keep going. "Almost. Harder." "Fuck, I'm so close. Get there." He synchronized every movement with the last, knowing now was the point where he couldn't change a thing. "Get there." His face, his voice, his scent. Each part of him filled my mind as I obediently came apart beneath him. He thrust roughly, then every muscle froze before he melted against me as he came. "Fuck, fuck, fuck." He breathed into my hair before falling quiet, heavy and still on top of me. The air conditioner turned on with a rattle and then a steady drone. After he caught his breath, Bennett rolled off me, dragging his hand across my sweaty back.
Chloe? I want more than just this.
His voice was so thick and heavy I wasn't actually sure he was awake. I froze, my thoughts exploding in a chaotic mess. What did you just say? He opened his eyes with apparent effort and looked at me.
I want to be with you.
Lifting myself on an elbow, I stared down at him, completely unable to pull a single word out of my brain.
So sleepy.
His eyes rolled closed, and he threw a heavy arm around me, pulling me down onto him.
Baby, come here.
He pressed his face into my neck and mumbled.
It's okay if you don't want it to. I'll take anything you'll give me. Just let me stay here until the morning, okay?
I was suddenly wide awake, staring at the dark wall and listening to the hum of the air conditioner. I was terrified that this changed everything, and even more terrified that he had no idea what he was saying and it would change nothing.
Okay,
I whispered into the dark, hearing his breathing slow into a steady sleeping rhythm. I rolled over and pulled a pillow against my body, seeking comfort. His scent pulled me out of sleep, but the cool sheets on the other side of the bed told me I was alone. I looked toward the bathroom door, trying to focus on any noise I could hear coming from inside. There wasn't any. I continued to lie there, clutching his pillow as my eyes began to grow heavier. I wanted to wait for him. I needed the reassurance of his warm body next to mine and the feel of his strong arms wrapped around me. I imagined him holding me, whispering that this was all real and nothing would change in the morning. Before long, my eyes drifted closed and I slipped back into an uneasy sleep. Sometime later, I awoke again, still alone. Rolling over quickly, I looked at the time, 5:14 a.m. What? Fumbling in the darkness, I put on the first thing I found and walked to the bathroom. Bennett? No answer. I knocked softly. Bennett? A groan and a soft shuffle sounded from the other side of the door.
Just go away.
His voice was hoarse and echoed off the bathroom walls. Bennett, are you okay?
I'm not feeling well. I'll be fine. Go back to bed.
Is there anything I can get you? I asked.
I'm fine. Just please go back to bed.
But...
Chloe,
he groaned, obviously annoyed. I turned, unsure of what to do, battling an odd, unsettling feeling. Did he even get sick? In just under a year, I'd never seen him with so much as a stuffy nose. It was obvious he didn't want me hovering outside the door, but there was no way I could go back to sleep either. Walking back to the bed, I straightened the blankets and headed toward the suite's living room. I grabbed a bottle of water from the minibar and sat on the couch. If he was sick, really sick, there was no way he could make the Gugliotti meeting in a couple of hours. I switched on the TV and began flipping through the channels. Infomercial, bad movie, Nick at Night, Wayne's World. Sitting back into the couch, I tucked my legs under me and prepared to wait. Halfway through the movie, I heard the water running in the bathroom. I sat up and listened as it was the first sound I'd heard in over an hour. The bathroom door opened and I flew off the couch, grabbing another bottle of water before entering the bedroom. Are you feeling better? I asked.
Yes. I think I just need to sleep now.
He stumbled into bed, burying his face in the pillow with a groan. What was wrong? I placed the bottle of water down on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed next to him.
It was just my stomach. I think it was the sushi at dinner.
His eyes were closed, and even in the dim light coming from the other room, I could see that he looked like hell. He turned away from me slightly, but I ignored it, placing one hand in his hair and the other on his cheek. His hair was damp and his face was pale and clammy, and despite his initial reaction, he leaned into my touch.
"Why didn't you wake me up?" I asked, brushing a few damp strands away from his forehead.
"Because the last thing I needed was you in there watching me throw up," he replied almost grumpily, and I rolled my eyes, offering him the bottle of water.
"I could have done something. You don't have to be such a man."
"Don't be such a woman. What could you have done? Food poisoning is a pretty lonely business."
"So what should I tell Gugliotti?" He groaned, rubbing his hands over his face.
"Shit. What time is it?"
I glanced at the clock. "Just after 7.
"What time is the meeting?"
8.
He started to get up, but was easy enough to shove back down into the bed.
"No way in hell are you going to that meeting like this. When was the last time you threw up?"
He groaned. "A few minutes ago."
"Exactly. Gross. I'll call him to reschedule." He gripped my arm before I could walk over to the desk and grab my phone.
"Chloe, you do it."
My eyebrows inched to my hairline. "Do what?"
He waited.
"The meeting?"
He nodded.
"Without you."
He nodded again.
"You're sending me to a meeting alone?"
"Miss Mills, you're as sharp as a spoon."
"Fuck off," I said, laughing and pushing him gently. "And I'm not doing it without you."
"Why not? I bet you know the account we're offering as well as I do. Besides, if we reschedule, he's just going to take a lavish trip to Chicago and send us the bill. Please, Chloe."
I stared down at him, waiting for him to break into a teasing grin or take it back. But he didn't. And the truth was, I did know the account, and I did know the terms. I could do this. "Okay," I said, smiling and feeling a surge of hope that we could figure this, us, out after all. "I'm in." His face grew harder, and he used the voice I had barely heard in days. It sent small waves of hunger through me.
"Tell me the plan, Miss Mills."
Nodding, I said, "I need to make sure he's clear on the project parameters and timelines. I'll watch out for overpromising. I know Gugliotti is notorious for that." When Bennett nodded, smiling a little, I continued. "I'll confirm the contract start dates and the milestones." When I ticked all 5 of them off on my fingers, his smile grew.
"You'll be fine."
I bent and kissed his damp forehead. "I know." 2 hours later, if you asked me if I could fly, I would have answered yes in an instant. The meeting had gone off perfectly. Mr. Gugliotti, who had initially been peeved to find an intern in the place of a Ryan executive, had softened when he heard the circumstances, and later he seemed impressed with the level of detail I was able to provide. He'd even offered me a job.
"After you finish with Mr. Ryan, of course,"
he'd said with a wink, and I carefully demurred. I wasn't sure I ever wanted to be done with Mr. Ryan. On the way back from the meeting, I called Susan to find out what Bennett liked when he was sick. Just as I suspected, the last time she'd been able to spoil him with chicken noodle soup and popsicles, he'd been wearing a retainer. She was delighted to hear from me, and I had to swallow the guilt I felt when she asked if he was behaving. I assured her that all was fine, and that he was only suffering from a mild stomach bug, and that, of course, I'd have him call. With a small bag of groceries in hand, I walked into the room, stopping in the small kitchen area to drop off the food and take off my tailored wool suit. Wearing only my slip, I moved into the bedroom, but Bennett wasn't there. The bathroom door was open, and he wasn't there either. It looked as if housekeeping had been in. The linens were crisp and neat, and the floor had been tidied of our piles of discarded clothes. The balcony door was open, letting in a cool breeze. Outside, I found him sitting in a chaise, elbows propped on his knees, his head in his hands. He looked like he'd had a shower and was now dressed in dark jeans and a short-sleeved green t-shirt. My skin hummed, warming at the sight of him. "Hey," I said. He looked up, eyes taking in every curve.
"Holy fuck, I hoped you didn't wear that to the meeting."
"Well, I did," I said, laughing. "But I wore it beneath a very prim navy suit."
"Good," he growled.
He pulled me close, wrapping his arms all the way around my waist and pressing his forehead into my stomach. "I missed you." My chest twisted tightly. What were we doing? Was this real, or were we playing house for a few days and then returning to normal? I didn't think I could do our normal after this, and wasn't sure I could see several steps into the future to how this all played out. "Ask him, Chloe." He looked up at me, his stare burning hot on my face as he waited for me to say something. "Are you feeling better?" I asked. Coward. His face fell, but he hid it quickly. "Much," he said. "How did the meeting go?" Although I was still on a high from the meeting with Gugliotti and was dying to tell him every detail, when he asked this, he removed his arms from my waist and sat back, leaving me feeling cold and hollow. I wanted to hit the rewind button and take us back 2 minutes to when he told me he'd missed me, and I could answer, "I missed you too." I'd kiss him, and we'd get distracted, and I'd tell him all about Gugliotti a few hours from now. But instead, I gave him every detail of the meeting, how Gugliotti reacted to me, and how I redirected his focus to the project at hand. I recounted every aspect of the discussion in such detail that by the end of my story, Bennett was laughing quietly. "My, you're wordy." "I think it went well," I said, stepping closer. "Put your arms around me again." But he didn't. He leaned back and gave me a stiff smile, the detached, beautiful bastard kind. "You were great, Chloe. I'm not at all surprised." I wasn't used to this kind of compliment from him. Improved handwriting, great blowjob. These were the things he knew how to notice. I was surprised how much his opinion mattered to me. Had it always mattered so much? Would he start to treat me differently if we were lovers instead of fuck buddies? I wasn't actually sure I even wanted him to be softer as a boss, or try to blend lover and mentor. I rather liked the beautiful bastard at work, as well as in bed. But as soon as I thought it, I realized the way we used to interact now felt like a strange foreign object in the distance, or a pair of shoes that I'd long since outgrown. I was torn between wanting him to say something dickish to jerk me back into reality, and wanting him to pull me closer and kiss my breast through my slip. Again, Chloe. Reason number 750,000 you don't fuck your boss. You turn a well-defined relationship into a mess of blurry boundaries. "You look so tired," I whispered as I began running fingers through the hair at the nape of his neck. "I am," he mumbled. "I'm glad I didn't go. I threw up. A lot." "Thanks for sharing," I laughed. Reluctantly, I pulled away and put my hands on his face. "I brought popsicles, ginger ale, ginger snaps, and saltines. Which do you want first?" He stared at me, completely confused for a beat before blurting, "You called my mom?" I went down to the conference for a few hours in the afternoon so he could sleep some more. He put up a strong front, but I could tell even half of a lime popsicle made him queasy when he turned a matching shade of green. Besides, at this conference in particular, he could barely walk 10 steps without being stopped, fawned over, pitched to. Even healthy, he wouldn't make it far enough to see anything worth his time anyhow. When I returned to the room, he was sprawled on the couch in a most unbeautiful bastard-like pose, shirtless and with his hand shoved down the front of his boxers. There was something so ordinary about the way he sat, bored, staring at the television. I was grateful for the reminder that this man was, in some ways, just a man. Just another person, moving around the planet, getting his bearings, not spending every second lighting the world's stage on fire. And buried within that epiphany that Bennett was just Bennett was a sense of wild longing, because there was this chance that he was becoming my just Bennett. And for a heartbeat, I wanted that more than I think I'd ever wanted anything. A woman with freakishly shiny hair flipped her head and grinned at us from the television. I collapsed on the couch next to him. "What are we watching?" "A shampoo commercial," he answered, pulling his hand out of his shorts to reach for me. I started to tease him about cooties, but shut up as soon as he began to massage my fingers. "Clerks is on, though." "That's one of my favorite movies," I said. I know. You were quoting it the first day I met you. Actually, that was Clerks 2, I clarified, and then stopped. Wait, you remember that? Of course I remember that. You sounded like a frat boy and looked like a fucking model. What man could ever forget that? I would have given anything to know what you were thinking right then. I was thinking, highly fuckable intern, 12 o'clock. Disengage, soldier. I repeat, disengage. I laughed and leaned against his shoulder. God, that first meeting was miserable. He didn't say anything, but kept running his thumb along my fingers, pressing and soothing. I had never had a hand massage before, and if he'd tried to turn it to oral sex, I might have turned him down just to keep him doing what he was doing. Wow, that's a total lie. I'd take that mouth between my legs any day of the— How do you want it to be, Chloe? He asked, pulling me out of my internal debate. What? When we're back in Chicago. I stared blankly at him, my pulse sending my blood thrumming in heavy bursts through my veins. Us, he clarified with forced patience. You and me, Chloe and Bennett, man and shrew. I realize this isn't simple for you. Well, I'm pretty sure I don't want to fight all the time. I bumped his shoulder playfully, although I do sort of like that part. Bennett laughed, but it didn't sound like a completely happy noise. There's a lot of space that comes after not fighting all the time. Where do you want to be? Together? Your girlfriend? Someone who sees the inside of your home and stays there with you sometimes? I started to answer, and the words evaporated in my throat. I guess that depends on whether it's realistic to think it can be anything. He dropped my hand and scrubbed his face. The movie came back on, and we fell into what I think was the most awkward silence in the history of the world. Finally, he picked my hand up again and kissed my palm. Okay, baby. I can handle just not fighting all the time. I stared at his fingers wrapped around mine. After what felt like an eternity, I managed. Sorry. This all feels a little new. For me, too, he reminded me. We fell into silence again as we continued to watch the movie, laughing in the same places and slowly shifting until I was practically lying on top of him. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at the clock on the wall and mentally calculated the hours we had left in San Diego. 14. 14 hours left of this perfect reality, where I could have him whenever I wanted him, and it didn't have to be secret or dirty, using anger as our only form of foreplay. What's your favorite movie? He asked, rolling me over so he hovered above me. His skin was hot and I wanted to take off my blouse, but I didn't want him to move even an inch for even a second. I like comedies, I began. There's Clerks, but Tommy Boy, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Clue, things like that. But I would have to say my all-time favorite movie would probably be Rear Window. Because of Jimmy Stewart or Grace Kelly? He asked, bending to kiss a trail of fire up my neck. Both, but probably Grace Kelly. I can see that. You have very Grace Kelly-like tendencies about you. His hand came up and smoothed a piece of my hair that had come loose from my ponytail. I hear Grace Kelly had a filthy mouth, too, he added. You love my filthy mouth. True, but I like it better when it's full, he said, meaningful smirk in place. You know, if you would shut up once in a while, you'd be damn near perfect. But I'd be a silent panty ripper, which I think is a lot creepier than the angry boss panty ripper. I dissolved into giggles under him, and he dug a finger between my ribs, tickling. I know you love it, he growled. Bennett, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. What do you do with them? He gave me a dark, teasing look. I keep them somewhere safe. Can I see? No. Why? I asked, narrowing my eyes at him. Because you'll try and take them back. Why would I want them back? They're all ruined. He grinned at me, but didn't answer. Why do you do that, anyway? He studied me for a moment, obviously considering his answer. Finally, he lifted himself onto his elbow and moved his face to within inches of mine.
For the same reason you like it.
With that, he stood up and pulled me with him into the bedroom. 17. I had experience with negotiations, holdouts, bargaining. Here I was in the unfamiliar position of having laid all my chips on the table. But when it came to Chloe, I didn't care. I was all in. Are you looking forward to being home? You've been gone for almost 3 weeks. She shrugged, pulling my boxers down without ceremony and wrapping her warm hand around me with a familiarity that made me ache in new places. I've had a nice time here, you know. I deliberated over each button of her blouse, kissing every inch of skin as it came into view. How much time do we have to play before our flight?
13 hours, she said, without looking at a clock. The answer certainly came quickly, and from the way her skin felt when I slid 2 fingers inside her underwear, I didn't think she was looking forward to leaving this hotel room any time soon. I tickled her thighs with my fingers, teased her tongue with mine, and rubbed myself against her leg until I could feel her arching toward me. Her legs slipped around my waist and she spread her hands against my chest as I reached down and pushed myself inside her, determined to make her come as many times as I could before the sun came up. For me, there was nothing in the world but her slick skin and the soft air of her moans against my neck. Over and over I moved on her, mute with my need, lost in her. Her hips rolled with mine and her back shifted to press her breasts against me, and I wanted to tell her, this, what we have, is the most amazing thing I have ever felt. Do you feel it too? But I had no words. I had only instinct and desire and the taste of her on my tongue and the memory of her laugh ringing in my ears. I wanted to keep that sound playing over and over. I wanted to be everything for her lover and sparring partner and friend. In this bed, I could be everything.
I don't know how to do this, she said in a weird moment, on the verge of coming and holding on to me so tight I thought I might bruise. But I knew what she meant, because it was painful to be filled so full of this longing and have no fucking idea how it would play out. I wanted her in a way that made me feel like every second I was sated and starving, and my brain didn't know what to do with it. So instead of answering her or telling her what I thought we could do, I kissed her neck and put my fingers against the soft skin of her hip and told her, I don't either, but I'm not ready to let it go yet.
It feels so good. She whispered this against my throat, and I groaned in quiet agony, patently unable to manage one articulate word in response. I feared I would howl. I kissed her. I pushed her deeper into the mattress. It went on forever, this splintering ecstasy. Her body rising to meet mine, her mouth wet and hungry, biting and sweet. I woke up when my pillow was yanked out from under my head and Chloe mumbled something incoherent about spinach and hot dogs. The woman was a sleep-talking, restless bedhog. I ran a greedy hand over her ass before rolling to look at the clock. It was only a little after 5 in the morning, but I knew we had to get moving soon to make our 8 o'clock flight. As much as I hated to leave our merry little den of sin, I hadn't done any work here and was starting to feel increasingly guilty about the career I'd essentially neglected. For the past decade, my career had been my life, and although I was growing more comfortable with the obliterating effect Chloe had on that balance, I had to retrieve my focus. It was time to get home, put on the boss hat, and start taking names. The early morning sun filtered in and washed her pale skin a gray-blue light. She was curled on her side, facing me, her hair a dark tangle across the pillow behind her.
Most of her face was now cuddled into my pillow. I could understand her hesitance to decide how our relationship would work back in reality. The San Diego bubble had been amazing, in part because it lacked every aspect that made our relationship tricky to begin with. Her job at Ryan Media, my role in the family business, her scholarship, our independently sharp attitudes. Although I wanted to push to define this thing between us and set expectations so I could dive in head first, her approach, far more tentative, was probably the right one. We hadn't bothered to pull the blankets back on the bed after we'd worked them to the floor last night, and I took the chance to stare at her nude body. I could definitely get used to waking up with this woman in my bed. But unfortunately, we didn't have a leisurely morning ahead of us. I tried to wake her with my hand on her shoulder, then a kiss on her neck, and finally a hard pinch on her ass. She reached out and smacked my arm hard before I'd even pulled it back. I wasn't even sure she was awake. Asshole. We should get up and get going. We need to be at the airport in a little over an hour. Chloe rolled over and stared up at me, face lined with pillow creases and her eyes unfocused. She didn't bother to cover her body like she had the first morning, but she wasn't all smiles either. Okay, she said. She sat up, drank some water, and kissed my shoulder before climbing out of bed. I watched her naked body as she walked to the bathroom, but not once did she look back at me. I didn't exactly need a morning quickie, but I wouldn't have minded a little spooning, maybe some pillow talk. Probably shouldn't have pinched her ass then. She didn't emerge, and after collecting my things, I knocked on the bathroom door. I'm heading next door to shower and pack. She was quiet for a few beats. Okay. Can I get something other than okay? Her laugh trailed from the other side of the door. I believe I said asshole earlier. I grinned. But when I reached for the door to leave, she opened the bathroom door and stepped directly into my arms, wrapping herself around me and pressing her face to my neck. She was still naked, and when she glanced up, her eyes seemed a little red. Sorry, she said, kissing my jaw before pulling me down for a longer, deeper kiss. I just get nervous before flying. She turned and walked back into the bathroom before I could meet her eyes and figure out if she was telling me the truth. The room next door felt eerily spotless, even for a high-end hotel chain. It took no time to pack, no time to shower and dress, but something kept me from going back over to Chloe's room so soon. It was as if she needed some time alone in there, to deal with whatever silent battle she was waging with herself. I could tell she was conflicted, but which way would she come down in the end? Would she decide she wanted to try? Or would she decide it wasn't possible to balance work and us? When impatience won out over chivalry, I pulled my bag into the hallway and knocked on her door. She opened it, dressed like a naughty businesswoman pinup, and it took me approximately 8 years to move my attention from her legs up over her breasts and finally to her face. Hey, gorgeous. She gave me a shaky smile. Hey. Ready to go? I asked, starting to walk past her to get her bag. The sleeve of my jacket brushed against her bare arm, and before I fully understood what was happening, she had my tie twisted around her fist and my back pressed against the wall, her mouth sliding over mine. I froze, surprised. Whoa, hello there, I mumbled against her lips. With one hand splayed on my chest, she began loosening my tie and groaned into my mouth when she felt my dick grow hard against her. Her nimble fingers had my tie yanked from my collar and on the floor at my feet before I remembered we had a flight to catch. Chloe, I said, struggling to pull back from her kisses. Baby, we don't have time for this. I don't care. She was nothing but teeth and lips, suction all down my neck, her hungry hands whipping my belt off, palming my cock. I cursed under my breath, completely unable to resist the way she gripped me through my pants, her bossy wiggling and tugging on my clothes.
Fuck, Chloe, you're fucking wild. I whipped her around, pressing her back into the wall and shoving my hand up beneath her blouse, roughly pushing the cup of her bra aside. Her greediness was infectious, and my fingers relished the pebbling of her nipples, the firm swell of her breast as she pushed forward into my palm. I reached down and slid her skirt over her hips, shoved her underwear down, and she kicked it aside before I lifted her off the floor. I needed to be in her. Now. "Tell me you want me," she said, the words coming out as exhales, only air. She was trembling, her eyes were squeezed closed. "You have no idea. I want everything you'll give me. Tell me we can do this." She shoved my pants and boxers down past my knees and wrapped her legs around my waist, digging the heel of her shoe into my ass. When my dick slipped against her, pushing just inside, I covered her mouth as she let out a small keening noise, almost a moan. Almost a sob. I pulled back, inspecting her face. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Chloe?" "Don't stop," she said, hiccuping, leaning to suck at my neck, hiding. With one hand, she tried to dig between us and reach for me. It was a weird kind of desperation. We knew frenzied fucking, and we knew covert quickies, but this was something else entirely. "Stop." I pressed closer, pinning her tightly to the wall. "Baby, what are you doing?" Finally, she opened her eyes, focusing on my collar. She slipped a button loose, and then one more. "I just need to feel you one more time." "What are you talking about, one more time?" She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't say anything. "Chloe, when we leave this room, we can leave everything here, or we can take everything we have with us. I believe we can figure it out. But do you?" She nodded, her lip pinned between her teeth so tightly the pink flesh was white. When she released it, it flushed a decadent, tempting red. "I want to." "I told you, I want more than this. I want to be with you. I want to be your lover." I swore, digging my hands into my hair. "I'm falling for you, Chloe." She bent over, laughing, relief spreading through her body. When she stood, she pulled me close again, pressing her lips to my cheek. "You're serious?" "Totally serious. I want to be the only guy who fucks you against windows, and also the first person you see in the morning, from where you lie, having stolen my pillow. I'd also like to be the person who gets you lime popsicles when you've had bad sushi. We only have a few months left where it's potentially complicated." With my mouth on hers and my hands on her face, I think she finally started to understand. "Promise me you'll take me to bed when we get back," she said. "I promise. Your bed." "Fuck yes, my bed. My bed is huge, with a headboard I can tie you to and spank you silly for being so ridiculous." And in that moment, we were completely perfect. In the hall, after one final kiss to her palm, I dropped her hand and led her down to the lobby. 18. Bennett went to get the car while I checked us out at reception. With one final glance around the lobby, I tried to download every memory of the trip. When I stepped outside, I saw Bennett standing near the valet. My heart felt like a wild drum beneath my ribs. I was still reeling. I realized he'd given me so many chances to tell him what I wanted, and I'd just been too unsure of whether we could ever make it work. Apparently his spine was stronger than mine. "I'm falling for you." My stomach twisted deliciously. Mr. Gugliotti spotted Bennett from the sidewalk and moved to him. They shook hands, seemed to exchange pleasantries. I wanted to walk up, join the discussion as a peer, but was worried that I wouldn't be able to contain what was presently happening to my heart, and my feelings for Bennett would show all over my face. Mr. Gugliotti looked up at me but didn't seem to recognize me out of context. He blinked back to Bennett, nodding at something he said,
and that lack of recognition made me hesitate even more. I wasn't someone to be noticed yet. The checkout paperwork, Bennett's to-do list, and his briefcase were all in my hand. I hovered at the periphery, an intern. Hanging back, I tried to enjoy the last few moments of ocean breeze. Bennett's rich voice carried across the few feet separating us.
Sounds like you all threw around some good ideas. I'm glad Chloe had the chance to go through the exercise.
Nodding, Mr. Gugliotti said,
Chloe's sharp. It went just fine. I'm sure we can telecon soon to start the process of handing it over.
Exercise? Start? Isn't that what I'd done? I had given Gugliotti papers from legal to sign and FedEx back.
Sounds good. I'll have Annie call to set something up. I'd like to go over the terms with you. I wasn't comfortable signing them quite yet. Of course you weren't.
My heart sped up as the spiral of panic and humiliation rose in my veins. It was as if the meeting that took place had been a mere performance for my benefit, and the real work would happen between these two men, back in the real world. Was this entire conference one giant fantasy? I felt ridiculous, remembering the details I'd shared with Bennett. How proud I'd been to have crossed this off his list and taken care of it so he could get better.
Henry mentioned that Chloe's got a Miller scholarship. That's fantastic. Is she staying on at Ryan Media after she finishes? Gugliotti asked. Not sure yet. She's a great kid. Definitely needs some seasoning, though.
I lost my breath in a rush, as if it'd been pulled out by a vacuum. Bennett had to be kidding. I knew, without Elliot having to tell me, and he had countless times, that I could have my pick of jobs when I finished. I'd worked at Ryan Media for years, working my ass off to do both my job and get a graduate degree. I knew some of the accounts better than the people managing them. Bennett knew this.
Gugliotti chuckled. Seasoning or no, I'd snatch her up in a beat. She held her own in there, Bennett. Of course she did, Bennett said. Who do you think trained her? The meeting with you was a great way for her to get her feet wet, so I appreciate it. No doubt she'll be just fine wherever she ends up, when she's ready.
He sounded nothing like either Bennett Ryan I knew. This wasn't the lover I'd just left a moment ago, grateful to and proud of me for capably stepping in for him. And this wasn't even the beautiful bastard, begrudgingly parsing out praise. This was someone else entirely. Someone who called me kid and acted like he'd done me a favor. I felt my face flame with anger, and I stumbled back into the hotel lobby, suddenly feeling like there wasn't enough oxygen anywhere. Seasoning? I did fine? He'd been my mentor? In what universe? I stared at the shoes of people moving in front of me as they came and left through the revolving lobby doors. Why did it feel like my stomach had dropped out, leaving nothing but a hole filled with acid? I'd been in the business world long enough to know how it works. The people at the top don't get there by sharing credit. They get there through big promises, big claims, and bigger egos. In my first 6 months at Ryan Media, I brought in a $60 million marketing account. I managed the $100 million L'Oreal skin portfolio. I designed the latest campaign for Nike. I made a country bumpkin into a business shark. I had always felt like he praised me against his will, and there had been something satisfying about proving him wrong, about exceeding his expectations almost to spite him. But now that we'd admitted our feelings had turned into something more, he wanted to rewrite history. He hadn't been a mentor to me. I hadn't needed him to be. He hadn't pushed me to succeed. If anything, before this trip, he'd stood in my way. He'd tried to get me to quit by being a bastard. I'd fallen for him despite all of this, and now he was throwing me under the bus just to save face for missing a meeting. My heart splintered into 1,000 pieces.
Chloe?
I looked up and met his confused expression.
The car is ready. I thought we were meeting outside.
I blinked, wiped my eye as if I had something in it and not as if I was about to break down in the lobby of the W. Right. I stood, collecting my things, and looked up at him. I forgot. Of all of the lies I'd ever told him, this was the worst, because he saw it. And from the way his brows pulled together and he stepped closer, eyes anxious and searching, he had no idea why I felt like I needed to lie about something like that. "You okay, baby?" I blinked. I'd loved it when he called me that 20 minutes ago, but now it felt all wrong. "Just tired." Again, he knew I was lying, but this time he didn't push it. He placed his hand on my lower back and led me out to the car. "19. I knew women could get moody out of the blue. I knew a few women who would get wrapped up in thoughts and scenarios and take a single what-if down the road 30,000 years into the future, getting upset about something they assumed I'd do 3 days from now. But that didn't feel like what was going on with Chloe, and she'd never been that kind of woman anyway. I'd seen her mad before. Hell, I'd seen every flavor of mad from her. Pissed, irate, hateful, borderline violent. I'd never seen her hurt. She buried herself in documents on the short drive to the airport. She excused herself to check in with her father when we were waiting at our gate. On the plane, she fell asleep almost as soon as we were in our seats, ignoring my very clever requests to join the Mile High Club. She woke up only long enough to decline lunch, even though I knew she hadn't eaten any breakfast. When she woke up as we began our descent, she stared out the window instead of looking at me. "Are you going to tell me what's wrong?" She didn't answer for what felt like forever, and my heart started to race. I tried to figure out all of the moments I could have fucked up. Sex with Chloe in bed. More sex with Chloe. Orgasms for Chloe. She had a lot of orgasms, to be honest. I didn't think it was that. Wake up, shower, basically profess my love. Hotel lobby, Gugliotti, airport. I paused. The conversation with Gugliotti had left me feeling a little slimy. I'm not sure why I had acted like such a possessive jackass, but there wasn't any denying that Chloe had that effect on me. She'd been amazing at the meeting, I knew she had, but I would be damned if she would take a step down and work for a man like Gugliotti when she finished her degree. He'd probably treat her like a piece of meat and stare at her ass all day. "I heard what you said." Her voice was so quiet it took me a moment to register that she'd said something, and then another beat to process it. My stomach dropped. "What I said when?" She smiled, turning to look at me finally, and fuck me, she was crying. "To Gugliotti." I sounded possessive. I'm sorry. "You sounded possessive?" she muttered, turning back to the window. "You sounded dismissive. You made me seem naive. You acted like the meeting was a training exercise. I feel ridiculous for how I described it to you yesterday, thinking it was something more." I put my hand on her arm, laughing a little. "Guys like Gugliotti have egos. He just needs to feel like the executives are listening to him. You did everything we needed. He just wants me to be the one to hand him the official contract." "But that's absurd. And you perpetuated it, with me as the pawn." I blinked, confused. I did exactly what she said, but that's how the game is played, isn't it? "You're my intern." A sharp laugh escaped her lips, and she turned to me again. "Right, because you've cared all this time how my career progresses." "Of course I do." "How would you know I need seasoning? You barely looked at my work before yesterday." "Patently false." I shook my head, getting a little riled. "I know that because I've watched everything you do. I don't want to put pressure on you to do more than you can right now, and that's why I'm maintaining control of the Gugliotti account. But you did a great job in there, and I was very proud of you." She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against her seat. "You called me kid." "I did?" I searched my memory and realized she was right. "I guess I just didn't want him to see you as this bombshell businesswoman he could hire away and try to fuck." "Jesus, Bennett, you're such an asshole. Maybe he wanted to hire me because I can do the job well."
I apologize. I'm acting like a possessive boyfriend.
The possessive boyfriend thing isn't new to me. It's that you're acting like you did me a favor. It's how condescending you're being. I'm not sure now is the best time to engage in more typical boss-intern interactions.
I told you I think you did an amazing job with him.
She glared at me, her face turning red. You never would have said that before. You would have said, "Good, back to work. That's it." And to Gugliotti you acted like you have me under your thumb. Before, you would have pretended you didn't even know me.
Do we really need to discuss why I was an asshole before? And you weren't exactly Little Miss Sunshine yourself. And why is now the time to hash this out?
This isn't about you being an asshole before. It's about how you're being now. You're compensating. This is exactly why you don't fuck your boss. You were a fine boss before. You let me do my thing and you did yours. Now you're the touchy-feely mentor who calls me kid to the guy I saved your ass with? Unbelievable.
Chloe,
I can deal with you being a giant dick, Bennett. I'm used to it. I expect it. It's how we work. Because beneath all the huffing and door slamming, I knew that you respected me. But how you were today, it puts a line there that wasn't there before. She shook her head, glanced back out the window.
I think you're overreacting.
Maybe, she said, leaning down to dig her phone out of her purse. But I've worked my ass off to get where I am. Am I risking all that?
We can do both, Chloe. For a few more months, we can work together and be together. This, what's happening today, it's called growing pains.
I'm not sure, she said, blinking away and looking past me. I'm just trying to do the smart thing, Bennett. I never questioned my own worth before, even when I thought you did. And then when I believed you saw exactly who I was and you belittled me. She looked up, eyes pained. I guess I don't want to start questioning myself now, after everything I've worked for. The plane landed with a jolt, and even still it didn't rattle me as much as what she said. I had led discussions with the heads of some of the largest finance departments in the world. I had taken on executives who thought they could squash me. I could fight with this woman until the world ended and feel like more of a man with every word. But right then, I couldn't find a single thing to say. To say I couldn't sleep that night would be an understatement. I could barely even lie down. Every flat surface seemed to have her imprint, and it didn't matter that she'd never been to my place. The mere fact that we talked about it, and that I'd planned for her to come here our first night back, made her ghost as good as permanent. I called her. She didn't answer. Granted, it was at 3 a.m, but I knew she wasn't sleeping either. Her silence was worsened by the fact that I knew she felt what I felt. I knew she was in just as deep as I was. But she thought she shouldn't be. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. I got in at 6, before I knew she'd be there. I got us both coffee, updated my calendar to save her some time she could use to catch up after being gone. I faxed the contract to Gugliotti, telling him the version he saw in San Diego was final and whatever Chloe presented would stand. I gave him 2 days to return the signature pages. And then, I waited. At 8, my father came into my office, Henry close behind. Dad scowled often, but rarely at me. Henry never looked pissed. But both of them looked like they wanted to murder me.
What did you do?
Dad dropped a piece of paper on my desk. Ice dripped into my veins.
What is that?
It's Chloe's resignation letter. She dropped it off with Sarah this morning. It was a full minute before I could speak. In that time, the only sound was my brother saying, "Ben, dude, what happened?"
I fucked up, I said, finally, pressing the heels of my hands to my eyes.
Dad sat down, face composed. He was sitting in the chair that, not a month ago, Chloe had sat in, spread her legs and touched herself while I tried to keep it together on the phone. Christ, how did I let it get to this? Tell me what happened. My father's voice got very quiet, a lull between quakes. I pulled my tie looser around my neck, suffocating under the weight on my chest. Chloe left me. We're together. Or we were. Henry shouted, "I knew it!" just as Dad yelled, "You what?" Not until San Diego, I reassured them quickly. Before San Diego, we were just fucking, Henry offered helpfully and received a sharp look from Dad. Yes, we were just... A spike of pain gouged into my chest. Her expression when I leaned in to kiss her. Her full bottom lip caught between my teeth. Her laugh against my mouth. And as you both know, I was a jerk. She gave back just as good, though, I assured them. And in San Diego, it became more. Fuck. I reached for the letter before pulling my hand back. She really resigned? My father nodded, his face completely unreadable. It was his superpower. All my life, in the moments when he felt the most, he showed the least. This is why we have the office fraternization policy, Ben, he said, softening his tone with my nickname. I thought you knew better than this. I know. I scrubbed my hands over my face and then motioned for Henry to sit down, and told them every detail of what happened with my food poisoning, the meeting with Gugliotti, and how Chloe had covered capably. I made it clear that we had essentially just decided to be together when I ran into Ed at the hotel. You are such a stupid son of a bitch, my brother offered once I'd finished, and what could I do but agree? After a stern lecture and an assurance that there would be more discussion on all of the ways I fucked up, Dad went to his office to call Chloe to request that she come work for him for the remainder of her internship. His concern wasn't just for Ryan Media, though if she chose to stay on after she finished her MBA, she could easily become one of the most important members of our strategic marketing team. It was also that she had less than 3 months left to find a new internship, learn the ropes, and take on a new project to present to the scholarship board. Given their influence on the business school, their feedback would determine whether Chloe would graduate with honors and receive a personal letter of recommendation from the CEO of J.T. Miller. It could make or break the beginning of her career. Henry and I sat in stony silence for the next hour. He glared at me and I stared out the window. I could almost feel how much he wanted to kick my ass. Dad came back into my office and picked up her resignation letter, folding it into neat thirds. I still hadn't been able to look at it. She'd typed it, and for the first time since I met her, I wanted nothing more than to see her ridiculously bad penmanship instead of impersonal black and white Times New Roman. I told her that this company values her, and that this family loves her, and we wanted her to come back. Dad paused, his eyes turning on me. She said that was more reason for her to do this on her own. Chicago turned into an alternate universe. One where Billy Sionis never cursed the Cubs, Oprah never existed, and Chloe Mills no longer worked for Ryan Media. She resigned. She walked away from one of the biggest deals in Ryan Media history. She walked away from me. I pulled the Papadakis file from her desk. The contract was drafted by legal while we were in San Diego, and all it needed was a signature. Chloe could have spent the last 2 months of her master's perfecting her slide presentation for the scholarship board. Instead, she'd be starting all over somewhere else. How could she have handled everything I gave her before, but have left over this? Was it really so important for me to treat her like a peer with a man like Gugliotti that she would sacrifice what we had between us? With a groan, I suspected that the reason I had to ask that at all was also the reason Chloe left.
I thought we could have our relationship and our careers too. But that was because I'd already proven myself. She was the intern. All she ever wanted was reassurance from me that her career wouldn't suffer from our recklessness, and I ended up being the one to ensure it did. I had to admit, I was surprised the office wasn't on fire with the story of what I'd done. But it seemed only Dad and Henry knew. Chloe had always kept our secret. I wondered if Sarah knew everything that had happened, whether she was in touch with Chloe. I soon had an answer. A few days after Chicago changed, Sarah walked into my office without knocking.
"This situation is complete bullshit."
I looked up at her and put down the file I held in my hands, staring at her just long enough to make her fidget before I spoke. I want to remind you that this situation is not your business.
As her friend, it is.
As an employee of Ryan Media and an employee of Henry's, it isn't. She gazed at me for a long beat and then nodded.
I know. I would never tell anyone if that's what you mean.
I mean that, of course. But I also mean your behavior. I won't have you barging into my office without knocking. She looked contrite, but didn't shrink under my stare. I was beginning to see why she and Chloe were such close friends. They were both strong-willed, bordering on reckless, and fiercely loyal.
Understood.
May I ask why you're here? Did you see her?
Yes.
I waited. I didn't want to press her confidence, but good Lord, I did want to shake every detail out of her.
She's been offered a job at studio marketing.
I let out a tense breath. A decent firm, if small. An up-and-comer with some good junior executives, but a few real assholes at the top. Who is she reporting to?
A guy named Julian.
I closed my eyes to hide my reaction. Troy Julian was on our board, an egomaniac with a penchant for barely legal arm candy. Chloe would know this. What was she thinking? Think, asshole. She was probably also thinking that Julian would have the resources to get her a project that she could get worked up substantially enough to present in 3 months. What's her project? Sarah walked to my door and closed it to keep the information quiet.
Sanders Pet Chow.
I stood, slamming my hands on my desk. Fury strangled me, and I closed my eyes to get a grip on my temper before taking it out on my brother's assistant. That's a tiny account.
She's only a master's student, Mr. Ryan. Of course it's a tiny account. Only someone in love with her would let her work on a $1 million, 10-year marketing contract.
Without looking back at me, she turned and left my office. Chloe didn't answer her cell, her home phone, or any emails I sent to the personal account she had on file. She didn't call, come by, or give any indication that she wanted to talk to me. But when your chest feels like it's been cracked open with a pickaxe, and you're unable to sleep, you do things like look up your intern's apartment address, drive over there on a Saturday at 5 in the morning, and wait for her to come out. And when she didn't emerge from the building after almost an entire day, I convinced the security guard that I was her cousin and was worried about her health. He escorted me up and stood behind me as I knocked at her door. My heart was going to slam its way out of my chest. I heard someone moving around inside, walk to the door. I could practically feel her body just inches from mine, separated by wood. A shadow moved through the peephole. And then, silence. Chloe? She didn't open the door, but she didn't walk away either. Baby, please open up. I need to talk to you. After what felt like an hour, she said, I can't, Bennett. I leaned my forehead against the door, pressed my palms flat. A superpower would have come in handy at that moment. Fire hands, or sublimation, or even just the ability to find the right thing to say. Right now, that felt impossible. I'm sorry. Silence. Chloe. Christ, I get it, okay? Berate me for being a new kind of prick. Tell me to go fuck myself. Do this on your terms. Just don't leave. Silence. She was still right there. I could feel her. I miss you. Fuck, do I miss you. A lot. Bennett, just... not now, okay? I can't do this. Was she crying? I hated not knowing. Hey, buddy. The security guard definitely sounded like here was the last place he wanted to be, and I could tell he was pissed I'd lied. This isn't why you said you wanted up here. She sounds fine. Let's go. I drove home and proceeded to drink a lot of scotch. For 2 weeks, I played pool at a seedy bar and ignored my family. I called in sick, and only got out of bed to grab an occasional bowl of cereal or refill my glass or use the bathroom, whereupon I'd look at my reflection and give myself the finger. I was a sad sack, and, having never experienced anything like this before, had no idea how to snap out of it. Mom came by with groceries and left them at my doorstep. Dad left me daily voicemails with updates about work. Mina brought me more scotch. Finally, Henry came by with the only known set of spare keys to my house and dumped a pot of cold water on me, then handed me some takeout Chinese. I ate the food while he threatened to take pictures of Chloe all over my house if I didn't get my shit together and come back to work. Over the next few weeks, Sarah surmised that I was incrementally losing my mind and needed a weekly update. She would keep it professional, telling me how Chloe was faring in her new job with Julian. Her project was coming together well, the folks at Sanders loved her, she pitched the campaign to the executives and got their go-ahead. None of this surprised me. Chloe was better than anyone they had, by a mile. Occasionally, Sarah would let something else drop. She's back at the gym. She looks better. Or, she cut her hair a little shorter. It looks really cute. Or, we all went out on Saturday. I think she had a good time, but she left early. Because she had a date? I wondered. And then I discarded the thought. I couldn't imagine seeing someone else. I knew what it had felt like between us and was fairly sure Chloe wasn't seeing anyone either. The updates were never enough. Why couldn't Sarah pull out her phone and take some covert pictures? I hoped I would run into Chloe at the store or on the street. I trolled La Perla a few times, but I didn't see her for 2 months. 1 month flies by when you're falling in love with the woman you're using for sex. 2 is an eternity when the woman you love leaves you. So when the eve of her presentation rolled around, and I heard from Sarah that Chloe was prepared and handling Julian with a fist of fire, but also looked smaller and less like herself, I finally found my balls. I sat down at my desk, opening PowerPoint and pulling up the Papadakis plan. Beside me, my desk phone rang. I considered not answering it, wanting to focus on this and only this. But it was an unknown local number, and a significant portion of my brain wanted to think it could be Chloe. "This is Bennett Ryan." A woman's laugh rang through the line. "Beautiful? You are one stupid bastard." 20. Director Cheng and the other members of the scholarship board filed in, greeting me amiably before finding seats. I checked my notes, triple-checked the connection between my laptop and the projector system, and waited for the last few stragglers to make their way into the conference room. Ice clinked in glasses as people poured themselves water. Colleagues spoke to each other in low voices, the occasional louder laugh breaking through the quiet. Colleagues. I had never felt so isolated. Mr. Julian hadn't even bothered to show up to the presentation to support me. Big surprise. This room was so much like another boardroom, in a building 17 blocks away. I had stood outside Ryan Media Tower earlier that morning, silently thanking everyone inside for making me who I was. And then I walked.
counting the blocks and trying to ignore the twisting pain in my chest, knowing that Bennett wouldn't be in the room with me today, stoic, fondling his cufflinks, eyes penetrating my calm exterior. I missed my project. I missed my coworkers. I missed Bennett's ruthless, exacting standards. But mostly, I missed the man he'd become to me. I hated that I'd felt the need to choose one Bennett over the other and ended up with neither. An assistant knocked, poking her head in and catching my eye. To Mr. Cheng, she said, "I just have a few forms for Chloe to sign first. We'll be right back." Without question, I followed her out the door, shaking my hands at my sides and willing my nerves to disappear. "You can do this, Chloe." 20 measly slides detailing a mediocre 5-figure marketing campaign for a local pet food company. Piece of cake. I just had to get through this, and then I could get the hell out of Chicago and start over somewhere hundreds of miles away. For the first time since I moved here, Chicago felt completely alien to me. Even so, I was still waiting for the thought of leaving to feel like the right decision. Instead of stopping at the assistant's desk, we moved on down the hall to another conference room. She opened the door and motioned for me to go in ahead of her, but when I walked in, instead of following me, she closed the door behind me, leaving me alone. Or not alone. She left me with Bennett. It felt like my stomach evaporated and my chest sank into the hollow space. He stood at the wall of windows at the far side of the room, wearing a navy suit and the deep purple tie I got him for Christmas, holding a thick folder. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "Hi." His voice broke on the single syllable. I swallowed, looking away to the wall and begging my emotions to stay bottled up. Being away from Bennett had been hell. More times a day than I could count, I would fantasize about going back to Ryan Media, or watching him walk into my new cubicle, officer and a gentleman style, or seeing him show up at my door with a La Perla bag hanging from a long teasing finger. But I wasn't expecting to see him here, and after not seeing him for so long, even that one crooked syllable almost wrecked me. I'd missed his voice, his snark, his lips, and his hands. I'd missed the way he watched me, the way he waited for me first, the way I could tell he had started to love me. Bennett was here, and he looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and although he was neatly dressed and clean-shaven, his clothes hung all wrong on his tall frame. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. I knew that feeling. Dark circles were carved beneath his eyes, and gone was the trademark smirk. In its place was a mouth fixed in a flat line. The fire I'd always assumed was just ingrained in his expression was completely extinguished. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He lifted a hand and ran it through his hair, completely ruining the pathetic styling job he'd attempted, and my heart twisted at the familiar disarray. "I'm here to tell you that you are a fucking idiot for leaving Ryan Media." My jaw dropped at his tone, and a familiar surge of adrenaline heated my veins. "I was an idiot about a lot of things. Thanks for coming. Fun reunion." I turned to leave. "Wait," he said, his voice low and demanding. Old instincts kicked in, and I stopped, turning back to him. He'd taken a few steps closer. "We were both idiots, Chloe." "On that, we agree. You're right to say you worked hard to mentor me. I learned my idiocy from the biggest idiot of all. Any good stuff I learned from your father." That one seemed to hit home, and he winced, taking a step back. I'd had a million emotions in the past few months, plenty of anger, some regret, frequent guilt, and a steady hum of self-righteous pride. But I realized what I'd just said wasn't fair, and I immediately regretted it. He had pushed me, even if he didn't always mean to, and for that I owed him something. But as I stood in the cavernous room with him, the silence blooming and spreading like a plague between us, I realized what I'd been completely missing this entire time. He gave me the chance to work on the most important projects. He brought me along to every meeting. He made me write the critical reports, make the difficult calls, handle the delivery of the most sensitive accounting documents. He'd mentored me, and it had mattered greatly to him. I swallowed. I didn't mean that.
I know. I can see it in your face. He ran his hand across his mouth. It's partly true, though. I don't deserve credit for how good you are. I suppose I want to take some of it anyway, being an egomaniac. But also because I find you truly inspiring. The lump that had started in my throat seemed to spread both down and out, clogging my ability to breathe, pressing down against my stomach. I reached for the chair nearest me, repeating, "Why are you here, Bennett?" Because if you mess this up, I will personally ensure you never work for a Fortune 500 again. That was not what I expected, and my anger reignited fresh and hot. I'm not going to mess this up, you asshole. I'm prepared. That's not what I'm saying. I have your Papadakis slides here, and I have handouts here. He held up a USB drive and a folder. And if you don't ace this presentation to that board, I will have your ass. There was no cocky grin, no intentional play on words. But behind what he said, something else began to echo. Us. This is us. Whatever you have there isn't mine, I motioned to the drive. I didn't prepare the Papadakis slides. I left before I put them together. He nodded as if I was exceptionally slow. The contracts were drafted for signature when you resigned. I put these slides together from all of your work. This is what you're presenting today, not some marketing campaign for some shitty dog food. It was humiliating having him throw that back in my face, and I took a few steps closer. Damn you, Bennett. I worked my ass off for you, and I worked my ass off for Julian. I will work my ass off wherever I go next, whether it's selling pet food or brokering million-dollar campaigns. And I'll be damned if you think you can come in here with this and tell me how to manage my career. You don't control me. He walked closer. I don't want to control you. Bullshit. I want to help you. I don't need your help. Yes, Chloe, you do. Take it. This is your work. He was close enough to reach out and touch, and took one step closer. Close enough now for me to feel his body heat, smell the way his soap and skin combined into that familiar scent. Please. You've earned this. It will impress the board more. A month ago, I'd wanted more than anything to present this account. It had been my life for months. It was mine. I could feel tears forming in my eyes and blinked them back. I don't want to be beholden to you. This isn't a favor. It's me paying you back. It's me admitting I fucked up. It's me telling you that you've got one of the sharpest business minds I've ever known. His eyes softened, his hand reaching out to push a strand of hair behind my shoulder. You won't be beholden to me. Unless you want to be. In a completely different way. I don't think I could work for you again, I said, pushing the words past the wall of heartbreak in my throat. It was taking every ounce of strength I had to not reach out and touch him. That isn't what I mean. I'm telling you that I messed up as a boss. He swallowed nervously, taking a deep breath. And I really messed up as a lover. I need you to take these slides, he said, holding out the USB drive. And I need you to take me back. I stared at him. I need to get back to the boardroom. No, you don't. They're delayed. He glanced at his watch. About a minute ago, I had Henry call Chang with some bullshit distraction so I could talk to you alone and tell you A, that you're an idiot, and B, that I want another chance with you.
A grin wobbled at the edges of my mouth, and I bit down on my lower lip to keep it in check. Bennett's eyes flamed victorious. "I appreciate what you're doing here," I said carefully. "I worked hard on that account, and I do feel ownership over it. If you don't mind, I'd like the board to see the details on the Papadakis in the handouts you have. But I'm still going to present the Sanders pitch." He considered this, eyes moving over my face. A muscle in his jaw twitched, a telltale sign of his impatience. "Fine. Pitch it to me here. Convince me you're not committing suicide in there." Straightening, I said, "The campaign is a play on Top Chef, but each episode or ad will feature a different ingredient in their food and will be a challenge to create something high-end gourmet for pets." Bennett's eyes were veiled, but he smiled sincerely. "That's clever, Chloe." I beamed at his honesty, savoring this moment. "Not really. That's the joke. Sanders' ingredients are basic. Good meat, simple grains. Dogs don't care how fancy their food is. They want meat, on a bone, that tastes good. My dad gave his dogs gourmet chow every day with brown rice and wheatgrass. I'm not kidding. And as a special gift on their birthday, he'd give them a cheap, meaty bone. It's the owner who cares about the greens and the brown rice and all that shit, not the pets." His smile broadened. "It's a way to make fun of ourselves for pampering our pets and embracing that side of us that treats them like cherished family. Sanders is the meaty bone chow that you can spoil them with every day. The animal judges will always choose the Sanders recipe." "You did it." "A campaign? That's the point." "Yes, but I knew you could do that. I meant the way you pitched it. You reeled me in, caught me." I laughed, knowing a Bennett compliment when I saw it. "Thank you." "Take me back, Chloe. Tell me right now that you will." A louder laugh burst out, and I rubbed my hands over my face. "Always such a bossy asshole." "You're going to pretend you don't miss me? You look like hell too, you know. Julia called me last night as I was putting the slides together." I gaped at him. "Julia called you?" "And told me you were a mess and I had to get my shit together and find you. I told her it was already underway. I was going to do it anyway, but her call made it easier to come here ready to beg." "Do you even know how to beg?" I asked, grinning outright now. Bennett licked his lips, dropping his eyes to my mouth. "Probably not. Want to show me?" "Give it a try. Give me your best grovel." "With all due respect, I'm going to have to ask you to suck it, Miss Mills." "Only if you beg." His eyes widened, and before he could say anything else, I took the Papadakis folder from his hand and left. I entered the boardroom with Bennett right on my heels. The murmuring voices stopped when we appeared. I handed Director Chang the folder, and he sifted through the handouts of the Papadakis slides. He smiled. "How on earth did you manage to finish 2 projects?" I stammered out a few syllables, completely unprepared for his question. "She's efficient," Bennett said, walking around me and taking a seat at the table. "When she wrapped up the Papadakis account, we suggested she take a short internship elsewhere until she finished her degree. After all, we're hoping she'll be at Ryan Media for the foreseeable future." I struggled to hide my shock. What the hell is he talking about? "Fantastic," said an older man at the end of the table. "On Papadakis?" Bennett nodded. "Working under my father. He needs someone to manage this one since it will take up an FTE. Chloe was the obvious choice, if she'll accept." I swallowed down about 5,000 different reactions. The primary one was irritation for his bringing this up in front of the board. But tangled up with that were also gratitude, excitement, pride. Bennett would be getting an earful after I was finished here. "Well, let's get started then," Chang said, leaning back in his chair. I picked up my laser pointer, and walked to the front of the room, feeling as though the floor were made of jello. 2 seats away from the head of the table, Bennett cleared his throat, catching my eye. I'd need to ask him about that, too, because I was pretty sure that right before I began speaking, he mouthed the words, "I love you." Sneaky bastard. They said my presentation would be one for the brochure, the website, the company newsletter. They had me sign some papers, pose for some photos, shake a lot of hands. They even offered me a job at J.T. Miller. "She's taken," Bennett said, pulling me to the side. He stared down at me, wordless, while everyone eventually filtered out of the room. "Yeah, about that," I said, trying to sound angry. I was still on a crazy high from the presentation, from the discussion, from the entire day. Having Bennett within kissing distance didn't hurt at all. "Please don't say no. I sort of stole Dad's thunder. He was going to call you tonight." "Is he really going to offer me a job?" "Are you going to take it?" I shrugged, feeling giddy. "Who knows? Right now, I just want to celebrate." "You were amazing up there." He bent and kissed my cheek. "Thank you. It was the most fun I've had in weeks." "The handouts were good, am I right?" I rolled my eyes. "Yes, but you made one critical error." His face fell. "What?" "You admitted that you know how to operate PowerPoint." With a laugh, he took my laptop bag from me and put it on a chair behind him, stalking closer with a dark smile. "I used to make slides for my boss. I was an intern once too, of course." Goosebumps broke out along my skin. "Did your boss yell?" "Occasionally." He ran his index finger up my arm. "Criticize your handwriting?" "Constantly." He leaned down, kissed the corner of my mouth. "Did your boss kiss you?" "My father has always been more of a handshaker, really." I laughed, slipping my hands under his jacket so I could wrap my arms around him. "Well, I'm not your intern anymore." "No, you're my colleague." I hummed, liking the sound of that. "And my lover?" "Yes." My voice shook on the single syllable, and I understood very clearly the meaning of drowning in relief. I was positive Bennett could feel my heart pounding against him. He bit my earlobe. "I'll have to find new excuses to get you up to the boardroom and naked against the window." Steam filled my veins, thick and warm. "You don't need excuses to take me home, though." Bennett kissed across my cheek and pressed a single soft kiss to my mouth. "Chloe." "Yes, Bennett?" "This flirting is all well and good, but I mean it when I tell you I can't have you leaving me again. It almost broke me." My ribs seemed to squeeze all of the air out of my lungs at the thought. "I don't think I could. I don't want to be away from you again either." "But you need to give me a chance to fix things when I screw up. You know I'm an ass sometimes." "Sometimes?" Growling, he whispered, "And I tear lingerie." I pushed a curl off his forehead. "And hoard it. Don't forget the creepy hoarding." "But I love you," he said, looking at me with wide eyes. "And I'm on a first-name basis now with most of the sales staff at La Perla. I did a lot of in-store moping while you were gone. I also have it on good authority that I'm the best sex you've ever had. So hopefully those things outweigh the bad." "Sold." I pulled him down to me. "Come here." I slid my mouth over his, nibbling his bottom lip. With my fists gripping his lapels, I turned and pressed him against the window, standing on my toes to get closer, as close as I possibly could. "So demanding now that you're all official."
"Shut up and kiss me," I laughed into his mouth. "Yes, boss."
Beautiful Bastard was written by Christina Lauren and read by Grace Grant. The associate producer was Ben Rimalower. This has been a presentation of Simon & Schuster Audio. Beautiful Bastard is available in paperback from Gallery Books.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.